The blood splattered across Dr. Marcus Brennan's Italian loafers before anyone in St. Augustine Memorial's ER could react. A 17-year-old girl convulsed on the gurney while alarms screamed through Chicago's most prestigious trauma center. Brennan barked orders, nurses scrambled, but standing motionless near the supply cart was Sarah Mitchell, the nobody nurse they'd spent 6 months trying to fire. Her faded scrubs hung loose on her thin frame. Her eyes, though those eyes tracked every monitor, every tremor, every mistake Brennan was about to make. Because Sarah Mitchell had seen worse, much worse, in places where hesitation meant body bags. Before we dive into Sarah's story, hit that subscribe button and follow this journey to the very end. Drop a comment with your city name so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The overhead fluorescence in St. Augustine Memorial cast everything in that particular shade of institutional green that made even healthy people look half dead. Sarah Mitchell had learned to hate that color over the past 6 months. The same 6 months she'd spent invisible, dismissed, and one write-up away from unemployment. She stood at the supply station restocking trauma kits when the ambulance bay doors exploded open. 17-year-old female, MVC, with rollover, GCS dropping, significant abdominal trauma. The paramedics rushed past her like she was furniture. Sarah's hand stilled on a box of gauze. Her gaze tracked the gurney's trajectory with the kind of focus most people reserve for defusing bombs.
Trauma 1, Sarge Somcom.
On! Dr. Marcus Brennan's voice cut through the chaos. He swept into the bay with the confidence of someone who'd never been wrong in his life. Or at least, never admitted it. Designer watch. Perfectly pressed white coat. The kind of doctor who appeared on hospital fundraising brochures. Sarah had learned to recognize predators in nice packaging. The girl on the gurney couldn't have been more than 100 pounds. Blonde hair matted with blood, skin the color of old newspaper. The monitors started their death song, that ascending pitch that meant someone's daughter was circling the drain. BP's crashing, a resident's voice cracked with panic. Get me a central line kit and 2 units O neg. Brennan didn't even look at the monitors. Somebody page surgery. This is a ruptured spleen. Textbook presentation. Sarah's jaw tightened. She saw the way the girl's abdomen moved, saw the specific pattern of bruising that hadn't quite developed yet, but would in another 20 minutes. Saw a dozen small details that didn't add up to ruptured spleen. Dr. Brennan? She started. Not now, Mitchell. He didn't look at her. Never did. In Brennan's world, nurses were ambulatory IV poles. Sarah watched them prep the central line. The girl's oxygen saturation dropped to 86, then 83. The respiratory therapist was bagging her, but something was wrong with the air exchange. Sarah could hear it, that subtle wheeze that everyone else missed because they were too busy following Brennan's orders. Sats are tanking, the resident called out. Increase the O2, Brennan snapped. And somebody get Mitchell out of here. She's crowding my space. A security guard materialized near Sarah's elbow. Tom Harris. Decent guy. Apologetic eyes. Sorry, Sarah. Doctor's orders. She didn't move. Couldn't. Because she was counting the girl's respirations and watching the way her trachea had shifted slightly to the left. The kind of shift that meant air was going somewhere it shouldn't. Sarah. Tom's voice dropped lower. Please don't make this hard. She's got a tension pneumothorax, Sarah said quietly. Not to Tom. To anyone who'd listen. Her right lungs collapsed. That's why she's decompensating. The words landed in the organized chaos of Trauma 1 like a grenade with the pin pulled. Brennan spun around. What did you just say? Sarah met his eyes. 6 months ago, she would have backed down, would have apologized, would have made herself smaller until she disappeared completely. But 6 months ago felt like a lifetime. Tension pneumo, she repeated. The MVC wasn't a rollover. Look at the bruising pattern. That's steering wheel impact. Blunt force to the right chest. She needs a needle decompression before you can even think about the OR. The ER went silent except for the monitors and the hiss of the oxygen. Brennan's face turned a color Sarah had seen before, usually right before he destroyed someone's career. You're a floor nurse who couldn't even pass her critical care certification. You've been written up 3 times for insubordination, twice for medication errors that I personally had to clean up, and once for sleeping on shift. And you want to give me diagnostic advice? Sarah's expression didn't change. The medication errors were your charting mistakes. I documented the corrections. The insubordination was me questioning your insulin protocol that nearly killed Mr. Patterson in 4B. And I wasn't sleeping. I was monitoring a patient you'd already given up on. But sure, let's focus on my performance review while this girl suffocates. A nurse Sarah didn't know well, Kelly, something, made a small sound. Might have been a suppressed laugh. Might have been shock. Brennan's voice dropped to that deadly quiet register. Tom, escort Nurse Mitchell off the floor, now. I want her badge pulled and a formal termination started within the hour. Tom reached for Sarah's arm. Sarah didn't resist. She'd learned when to fight and when to retreat. This was a retreat, strategic withdrawal. She let Tom guide her toward the corridor. Behind her, Brennan resumed his performance. Now, where were we? Someone get me those units and prep this patient for surgery. Okpa. The monitor alarms changed pitch. Sarah stopped walking. She'd heard that sound before. In field hospitals where the walls were canvas and the nearest OR was a helicopter ride through hostile territory, that sound meant seconds, not minutes. Sats at 72! She's not responding. Pupils are blown. Sarah turned around. Tom's grip on her arm tightened. Sarah, don't. But she was already moving. Not running. Running attracted attention, got you stopped. She walked with the kind of purpose that made people assume you belonged exactly where you were going. She reached the trauma bay. Brennan was at the girl's head trying to intubate. His hands were shaking. Not much, just enough. Dr. Brennan, she said clearly, step back. He looked up, and Sarah saw something in his face she'd seen in young officers during their first firefight. Panic disguised as authority. I swear to God, Mitchell, if you don't leave right now, her trachea's deviated. You can feel it if you check. Right lung's completely collapsed, and there's enough pressure building in her chest cavity to crush her heart. You've got maybe 90 seconds before she codes. The resident, a kid who looked about 12, touched Brennan's shoulder. Sir, her trachea is shifted. I can see it. Brennan's jaw worked. His career, his reputation, his ego. They were all at war with the reality that the patient was dying. Sarah didn't wait for permission. She grabbed a 14-gauge needle from the crash cart. Her hands moved with the efficiency of someone who'd done this procedure in the dark, in the rain, in the back of moving vehicles. What the hell are you doing? Brennan's voice pitched up. Sarah felt for the landmarks on the girl's chest. Second intercostal space, mid-clavicular line. Her fingers found the spot. Tom, she said calmly, you might want to look away. She inserted the needle. The hiss of escaping air was immediate and unmistakable. The tension in the girl's chest released like a cork popping from champagne. The monitors responded almost instantly, oxygen saturation climbing, heart rate stabilizing. Sarah withdrew the needle, taped the catheter in place. The trauma bay was utterly silent. The girl took a shuddering breath, then another. The blue tinge started draining from her lips. Sarah stepped back. She'll need a chest tube before transport, and you should probably still check for that splenic injury. The impact force was significant. She looked at Brennan. He stared at her like she'd just materialized from another dimension. Where? His voice cracked. He cleared his throat. Where did you learn that? Sarah didn't answer. She turned to leave. That's when the headlights flooded the ambulance bay. Not ambulance lights. These were different. Whiter. Harsher. The kind of lights that meant government vehicles. 3 black SUVs pulled up to the ER entrance in formation. Military precision. Sarah's spine went rigid. Tom noticed. You okay? She wasn't. Because she recognized those vehicles. Knew exactly what unit used them. Knew what it meant that they were here. The ER staff crowded toward the windows. In Chicago, you didn't see military convoys pulling up to civilian hospitals. Not unless something had gone very, very wrong. 6 people in dress uniforms emerged from the SUVs. 5 men, 1 woman. The kind of officers who'd seen enough combat that they walked like violence was a language they spoke fluently. The lead officer, older, gray-haired, chest full of ribbons, scanned the ER through the glass doors. His eyes found Sarah. He nodded once, a recognition. Sarah closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, her expression had gone completely flat. Brennan was watching the officers approach with confusion and irritation. This is a hospital, not a military recruitment center. Tom, find out what they want and get them to come back during visiting hours. Tom started toward the entrance. The doors opened before he got there. The gray-haired officer walked in like he owned the building. His gaze swept the room, cataloging threats and assets with practiced efficiency. Then he focused on Sarah with the kind of attention that made everyone else in the ER suddenly aware they were witnessing something they didn't understand. "Lieutenant Rachel Kincaid," he said. His voice carried the weight of someone used to being obeyed. "Colonel James Morrison, 3rd Medical Battalion. Command's been trying to reach you for 8 hours." The ER stopped pretending to work. Brennan's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: confusion, disbelief, dawning horror. "There's some mistake," he said. "She's just a nurse, a floor nurse. She doesn't even have critical care certification." Colonel Morrison's expression didn't change. He didn't even look at Brennan. Lieutenant Kincaid served 3 tours with the 3rd Medical Battalion in forward operating bases across Iraq and Afghanistan. She has 7 combat citations, 2 Bronze Stars, and a Navy Cross for pulling 11 Marines out of a burning field hospital while under active mortar fire. She holds advanced trauma certifications in battlefield surgery, mass casualty management, and hostile environment medicine. And according to her service record, she saved more lives in 4 years than most civilian doctors see in a lifetime. The silence in the ER was so complete Sarah could hear the IV pump beeping in room 3. Brennan's mouth opened, closed, opened again. Kelly, the nurse who'd almost laughed earlier, whispered, "Holy shit." Morrison finally looked at Brennan. "You're the attending who threatened to terminate her employment?" Brennan's face had gone from red to white. There were protocol concerns. She just performed an emergency needle decompression that saved a patient's life." Morrison's voice could have stripped paint. "While you were misdiagnosing and preparing to kill that girl with unnecessary surgery. So please, doctor, explain to me which protocols were violated." Sarah found her voice. It came out rougher than she intended. "Colonel, this isn't necessary." "Lieutenant, with respect, it is." Morrison turned back to her. "We've got a situation. Medical evacuation gone wrong at a training facility in Wisconsin. Multiple casualties. Command wants you there immediately." "I'm not active duty anymore." "You're IRR, Inactive Ready Reserve, and you're being activated as of 20 minutes ago." Sarah's hands were steady, but something in her chest felt like it was cracking. She'd run so far from that life. Changed her name, Rachel Kincaid, to Sarah Mitchell. Moved to a city where nobody knew her. Took a floor nursing job because it was quiet and unremarkable and didn't require her to make decisions that got people killed. "I can't," she said quietly. Morrison's expression softened fractionally. "Rachel, I'm Sarah now, and I can't go back. We need you. Those kids in Wisconsin need you." Behind them, the girl on the gurney, the one Sarah had just saved, started coughing, coming around. Her mother would get a phone call soon, would cry with relief instead of grief. Sarah had made that call before. Too many times. The other kind of call. The one that started with, "I'm sorry," and ended with a life destroyed. "Find someone else," Sarah said. "There is no one else. Not for this." Morrison pulled a tablet from his jacket. "The training accident involved experimental equipment, blast injuries we haven't seen before. The field medics are overwhelmed, and we've already lost 2 because they didn't know—" He stopped himself. "They weren't prepared. You've seen this before. In Kandahar. The IED pattern from the insurgent compound." Sarah's breath caught. Kandahar. The compound. The day she'd lost half her unit because the blast pattern was wrong, and by the time she figured it out, "No," she said. "Rachel, my name is Sarah." Her voice cracked on the name. "And I'm not that person anymore." Morrison studied her for a long moment, then he nodded slowly. "All right, but if you change your mind—" He held out a card. Sarah didn't take it. Morrison set it on the nurse's station. "The offer stands." He turned to leave. His team fell in behind him. Brennan found his voice. "Wait, what about—" He gestured vaguely at Sarah. "Is she really? Did she actually—" Morrison paused at the door. "Lieutenant Kincaid was the best battlefield trauma surgeon I ever served with. She could have gone anywhere after discharge. Instead, She chose to disappear. I'd suggest you consider why someone with her skills would choose to work as a floor nurse at a second-rate hospital. And then I'd suggest you thank whatever God you believe in that she was here tonight." He left. The SUVs pulled away. The ER slowly remembered how to move, how to breathe, how to pretend the last 10 minutes hadn't fundamentally altered their understanding of reality. Sarah stood very still. She could feel every eye on her, could hear the whispers starting. Brennan cleared his throat. "Mitchell, Sarah, I think we should talk about—" "No," Sarah said flatly. "I need to check on my other patients." She walked toward the corridor. Her legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. Tom caught up with her near the elevator. "Sarah, that was— I had no idea. Nobody did. That was the point." "Why didn't you tell anyone?" Sarah pressed the button for the 4th floor. "Would you tell people you'd failed?" "Failed? You saved lives. You're a decorated—" "I lost 11 people in one day." Sarah's voice was flat, empty. 11 soldiers who trusted me, who I was supposed to protect. And I watched them die because I missed the signs, because I was too slow, too stupid, too— She stopped herself. "So no, Tom, I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who lived when better people didn't." The elevator doors opened. Sarah stepped inside. Tom put his hand on the door. "For what it's worth. I think you're the bravest person I've ever met." Sarah almost laughed. "You have no idea how wrong you are." The doors closed. She rode to the 4th floor, checked on Mr. Patterson, stable, sleeping peacefully. Checked on Mrs. Liu, complaining about the food, which meant she was getting better. Checked on the post-op gallbladder in 4F. Vitals perfect, pain controlled. Normal. Quiet. Safe. Her pager went off. 911, Trauma 1. Sarah's heart stopped. She ran. By the time she reached the ER, the girl, the teenager she'd saved, was seizing. Not normal post-traumatic seizures. Something worse. The monitors showed a rhythm Sarah recognized instantly. Had seen it before in soldiers exposed to certain chemical compounds in improvised explosive devices. "She's crashing again," the resident yelled. Brennan was shouting orders, but they were wrong. All wrong, treating symptoms instead of cause. Sarah pushed through the crowd. "It's not a seizure," she said. "It's toxidrome. Chemical exposure from the accident. The car she was in. What was she driving?" A paramedic Sarah hadn't noticed before looked up. Dad said it was their farm truck. They were transporting pesticide containers to the disposal site." Sarah's mind raced through chemical compounds. "Organophosphate poisoning. She's cholinergic crisis. We need atropine and pralidoxime. Now." Brennan stared at her. How could you possibly— "I've treated this before. Different context. Same pathology. Give her the antidotes or she dies. Your choice, doctor." For the first time since Sarah had met him, Marcus Brennan made a smart decision. "Get the medications," he ordered. Sarah administered them herself. Couldn't trust anyone else to dose it right. The girl's seizures slowed, stopped, her breathing eased, the monitors stabilized. Sarah stepped back. Her hands were shaking now, adrenaline catching up with her. Brennan watched her with something like awe or fear. Hard to tell the difference. "How did you know?" he asked quietly. Sarah didn't answer. She walked out of Trauma 1, out of the ER, out of the hospital. She made it to her car before she started crying. The card Colonel Morrison had left was in her pocket. She didn't remember taking it. Her hands must have grabbed it without her brain's permission. She sat in the driver's seat of her 15-year-old Honda and stared at the card. A phone number, nothing else. In Wisconsin, soldiers were dying, kids probably, 19, 20 years old. Someone's son, someone's daughter, bleeding out because the medics didn't recognize the blast pattern. Sarah had recognized it, in Kandahar. Too late to save everyone, but soon enough to save 6. She thought about the teenage girl upstairs, thought about how close that had been, thought about all the times in the last 6 months she'd watched Brennan make mistakes and stayed silent because speaking up wasn't worth the fight. How many people had died because she was too afraid to be Rachel Kincaid? Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Training facility update. 3 critical, 2 stable, 1 DOA. Field medics requesting specialist support. ETA Wisconsin, 90 minutes by military transport. Your call, Lieutenant. Morrison. Sarah closed her eyes, opened them, made the call. "This is Rachel Kincaid," she said when Morrison answered. "I'm in." The helicopter blades beat the air above Fort McCoy with a rhythm that lived somewhere between Rachel's heartbeat and a panic attack. She'd forgotten how loud military transport was, how the vibration rattled your teeth, how the smell of fuel and canvas and fear got into your clothes and stayed there. She'd been Sarah Mitchell for 18 months. Rachel Kincaid felt like wearing someone else's skin. The loadmaster, a kid with corporal stripes who couldn't have been more than 22, gestured toward the landing zone. Rachel unbuckled and moved toward the door before the skids touched ground. Muscle memory. Her body remembered things her mind had tried to bury. Morrison was waiting on the tarmac. Behind him, chaos. Ambulances, shouting. That particular kind of controlled panic that meant people were dying faster than anyone could save them. "Casualty report," Rachel said. Not asked. Ordered. The voice that came out wasn't Sarah's soft uncertainty. It was Lieutenant Kincaid's command bark. Morrison handed her a tablet without breaking stride. 7 total. 3 critical, 2 serious, 1 minor, 1 DOA. The critical cases are deteriorating. Field medics stabilized what they could, but they're out of their depth. Rachel scanned the medical data while jogging toward the makeshift trauma center. Her eyes caught on the injury patterns. Blast radius inconsistent with standard training explosives. Tissue damage more consistent with thermal and chemical combined. What the hell kind of equipment were they testing? "Classified," Morrison said. "Colonel, I need to know what I'm treating or I'm flying blind." Morrison's jaw tightened. "Experimental munitions, new suppression technology. The brass thought it was stable." They were wrong. Clearly. They hit the trauma tent. Rachel pushed through the flap and her brain shifted into a mode she hadn't accessed in 18 months. Time slowed. Her vision sharpened. Every detail crystallized. 3 gurneys, 3 soldiers, 2 men, 1 woman. All young, all dying. The medics looked up when she entered. One of them, a sergeant with blood-soaked fatigues, shook his head. "Ma'am, we've tried everything. The wounds aren't responding to standard protocol." Rachel moved to the first patient. Male, maybe 19. Massive thermal burns across his chest and arms, but underneath, something wrong with the tissue degradation pattern. She'd seen chemical burns before. This was different. "Get me a full chem panel and tissue sample. I need to know what's in his system." A medic hesitated. "We don't have the equipment here." "Then improvise. You've got a field lab somewhere on this base. Use it." She moved to the second patient while they scrambled. Female, early 20s, bleeding from wounds that shouldn't still be hemorrhaging. Rachel checked the clotting factors. Normal. Checked the blood type. O positive, no compatibility issues. But the bleeding wouldn't stop. Rachel's mind raced through possibilities. Anticoagulant exposure. Hemophilia. No, too sudden. Something in the blast itself disrupting normal coagulation. "I need factor 7 and TXA. Now." "Ma'am, we already tried..." "Did you try both together at maximum dose?" Silence. "That's what I thought. Do it." She moved to the third patient. Male, mid-20s, unconscious but breathing, vitals stable. Too stable. Rachel had seen this before, the calm before metabolic collapse. She checked his pupils. Reactive but sluggish. Checked his reflexes. Nothing. "How long has he been unresponsive?" 40 minutes, a medic answered. Rachel pulled back the patient's eyelid and looked closer. Petechial hemorrhaging in the sclera. She pressed her fingers against his neck, feeling for the carotid pulse. Strong but irregular. She knew this pattern. Kandahar, the compound, the day everything went to hell. "He's got a microembolism cascade," she said. "Particulate matter from the blast is traveling through his bloodstream. He's going to stroke out in the next 10 minutes unless we can filter it." Morrison was behind her. "How?" "Plasmapheresis. We need to cycle his blood through a filter." "We don't have that equipment." Rachel turned to face him. "Then we make it. I need dialysis tubing, a pump, and something that can act as a filter membrane, saline bags, IV catheters, and someone with steady hands." Morrison didn't question her. He started barking orders. Rachel went back to patient 2, the female soldier. The bleeding still hadn't stopped despite the medications. Rachel grabbed a suture kit and started working. Not closing the wounds, that wouldn't help. She was looking for the source, the specific vessel that was causing the problem. Her hands moved with the precision of someone who'd done this in worse conditions. In the dark, under fire, in the back of moving vehicles while mortars fell like rain. "Talk to me," she said to the soldier. Not sure if the woman could hear her. Didn't matter. Rachel had learned that talking helped, kept her focused. "You're going to be fine. I've seen worse. I've fixed worse. You're going to walk out of here and tell everyone about the crazy medical officer who wouldn't let you die." The soldier's eyes flickered. Rachel kept working. Found the bleeder, clamped it, sutured, checked for more. The wounds were extensive but manageable now that she understood the pattern. Behind her, medics were assembling the makeshift plasma pheresis setup for patient 3. Rachel glanced over. They were doing it wrong. "The filter goes before the pump, not after," she called out. "You'll shred the blood cells otherwise." They corrected it. Patient 1 started seizing. Rachel's head snapped around. The chem panel results weren't back yet, but she didn't have time to wait. She ran through the symptoms. Thermal burns, neurological involvement, seizure activity. "Organophosphate derivatives," she muttered. Not quite the same as the pesticide exposure she'd treated in Chicago, but close enough. "Get me atropine, 2 milligrams IV push." "Ma'am, we already gave him—" "Not enough. This is a different compound, higher dose threshold, trust me." The medic administered the medication. The seizing slowed, stopped. Rachel moved between the 3 patients like a conductor managing an orchestra, adjusting medications here, changing ventilator settings there, monitoring the makeshift blood filtration on patient 3. Time became irrelevant. Could have been 20 minutes, could have been 2 hours. Morrison appeared at her elbow. "Lieutenant?" She didn't look up. "Status?" "All 3 are stable. You did it." Rachel's hands stilled. She looked at the monitors. Morrison was right. Vitals holding. No active bleeding. The seizures controlled. Patient 3's neurological function was improving. She'd done it. The tent flap opened. A young lieutenant, male, barely old enough to shave, poked his head in. "Colonel Morrison?" "There's a situation." Morrison's expression hardened. "What kind of situation?" "The hospital administrator from Chicago, Dr. Brennan. He's here with lawyers and hospital security, and—" The lieutenant swallowed. "And the FBI." Rachel's stomach dropped. Morrison's voice went dangerously quiet. "Explain." Dr. Brennan filed a formal complaint. Criminal charges. He's claiming Lieutenant Kincaid assaulted a patient, practiced medicine without a license, stole controlled substances, and violated about 15 federal statutes. The FBI is investigating. They want to question her. Now. Rachel set down the suture kit carefully. Her hands weren't shaking. Interesting. They should have been. "He followed me here," she said. "Apparently." Morrison's jaw worked. "Rachel, you need to know. If the FBI wants to question you about civilian conduct, I can't stop them. You weren't on active duty when the incident occurred." "I know, but I can delay them, give you time to—" "No!" Rachel pulled off her gloves. "If I run, it looks like guilt. I didn't do anything wrong in that ER. Everything I did was to save a patient's life. Brennan's claiming you assaulted her, that the needle decompression was unnecessary and reckless." Rachel almost laughed. "The girl would be dead if I hadn't intervened. The medical records will show that." Medical records can be interpreted different ways, especially by people motivated to see what they want to see. Rachel understood what he wasn't saying. Brennan had money, influence, a reputation to protect. And she was nobody, just a nurse who'd overstepped, who'd embarrassed a prominent doctor in front of his staff. The system protected people like Brennan. "Where are they?" Rachel asked. "Administrative building, conference room B." Rachel started walking. Morrison caught up. "Rachel, you should have representation. A lawyer, someone from JAG at minimum." "I don't need a lawyer. I need the truth. And I need Brennan to understand what happens when he comes after the wrong person." The walk across the base took 4 minutes, long enough for Rachel to run through scenarios, short enough that she didn't have time to second-guess herself. The conference room was packed. Brennan sat at the head of the table like he owned it. Expensive suit, matching expensive lawyers on either side, hospital security guards by the door, and 2 FBI agents, a man and woman, both wearing expressions of professional skepticism. Rachel walked in. Brennan's face twisted into something approximating triumph. There she is. Officers, that's the woman who assaulted my patient. Rachel pulled out a chair and sat down. I saved your patient after you misdiagnosed her and nearly killed her with inappropriate treatment. One of the lawyers leaned forward. Ms. Mitchell. Lieutenant Kincaid, Rachel corrected. I'm on active duty as of 3 hours ago, which means this conversation is happening under military jurisdiction. The FBI agents exchanged glances. Brennan's confidence flickered. That doesn't change what you did. You performed an invasive medical procedure without physician oversight, without consent. In a civilian hospital, that's assault and battery at minimum. The patient was unconscious and dying. Implied consent applies. And I had more than enough medical training to perform the procedure. You're a nurse. I'm a combat medical officer with 3 tours and 7 citations for battlefield trauma care. I've performed that exact procedure 43 times, successfully, every time. One of Brennan's lawyers shuffled papers. Dr. Brennan's statement indicates that your intervention was medically unnecessary, that the patient's condition was stable, and your actions created additional risk. Show me the medical records, Rachel interrupted. Silence. You're here to question my medical judgment. Fine. Show me the records. Show me the vital signs before and after my intervention. Show me the imaging. Show me literally any evidence that supports Dr. Brennan's version of events. The female FBI agent spoke for the first time. Dr. Brennan provided us with medical documentation. Let me guess. Documentation he prepared himself, after the fact. Brennan's face went red. Are you calling me a liar? I'm calling you incompetent. There's a difference. One of the lawyers stood. Agent Torres, this is clearly not a productive... Sit down, Agent Torres said quietly. The lawyer sat. Torres focused on Rachel. Lieutenant Kincaid, walk me through what happened, from the beginning. Rachel did. Clinical details, timeline, observations. She recited it like a mission debrief. Emotionless, factual, thorough. When she finished, Torres looked at Brennan. Doctor, your documentation states the patient's oxygen saturation was stable at 92% when Lieutenant Kincaid intervened. That's correct? And your treatment plan was to proceed with emergency surgery for a presumed splenic rupture. Yes, Torres glanced at her notes. Except the ER records, the ones generated automatically by the patient monitors, show oxygen saturation at 71%. And the patient never went to surgery. She went to interventional radiology where they placed a chest tube for a collapsed lung, exactly what Lieutenant Kincaid diagnosed. Brennan's mouth opened, closed. His lawyer jumped in. Those monitor records could be inaccurate. Equipment malfunctions happen. Every monitor in that trauma bay? Torres's tone was dry. Simultaneously? Rachel watched Brennan's face, watched him realize the ground was disappearing beneath him. Furthermore, Torres continued, we spoke with the paramedics who transported the patient, with the respiratory therapist, with 3 nurses who were in the room. Their statements are remarkably consistent. They all describe a patient in extremis who stabilized immediately after Lieutenant Kincaid's intervention. None of them describe assault. They describe a medical emergency resolved by someone who knew what she was doing. She defied my direct orders, Brennan said. His voice had lost its edge. She created chaos in my ER. She has a history of insubordination. We spoke to hospital staff about that too. The male FBI agent, younger, sharper, flipped open his own folder. Interesting pattern. Every incident of insubordination on Lieutenant Kincaid's record corresponds with her questioning your medical decisions. Decisions that, according to peer review documentation we subpoenaed, had a 38% error rate. Rachel blinked. She hadn't known that number. Hadn't known anyone was tracking it. The agent continued. We also found 6 formal complaints filed against you by nursing staff over the past 2 years. Complaints that hospital administration apparently buried. Complaints describing a hostile work environment, patient safety concerns, and retaliation against staff who questioned your judgment. Brennan's lawyers were whispering urgently. This is a witch hunt, Brennan snapped. I'm the victim here. She humiliated me. She undermined my authority in front of my entire staff. She saved a patient's life, Morrison said from the doorway. Rachel hadn't heard him enter. A patient you were actively killing through negligence. Brennan shot to his feet. You have no right. I have every right. That's my medical officer you're trying to destroy. And I don't take kindly to civilians weaponizing law enforcement because their ego got bruised. Agent Torres closed her folder. Dr. Brennan, based on the evidence we've reviewed, there's no basis for criminal charges against Lieutenant Kincaid. In fact, we'll be forwarding our findings to the State Medical Board for review of your conduct. What? Brennan's voice cracked. You can't. I came to you. You wasted federal resources on a vendetta. You falsified medical records, and you endangered a patient through incompetence. Torres stood. Be grateful we're not charging you with obstruction. The FBI agents left. Brennan stood there, surrounded by his expensive lawyers, looking like a man watching his entire world collapse in slow motion. Rachel should have felt triumphant, should have enjoyed watching him squirm. Instead, she just felt tired. Are we done here? She asked. Brennan's head snapped toward her. You think this is over? You think you've won? I'll make sure you never work in medicine again. I have connections. Influence. I'll destroy your reputation. You have nothing, Morrison said flatly. And if you come near my officer again, I'll make it my personal mission to ensure the medical board learns about every patient you've harmed through negligence, every complaint you've buried, every regulation you've violated. Do we understand each other, Doctor? Brennan grabbed his briefcase. His lawyer scrambled to follow. He stopped at the door and looked back at Rachel. I know people, he said, desperate, grasping, important people. This isn't finished. He left. The security guards trailed after him. Rachel sat alone in the conference room with Morrison. That went well? Morrison said dryly. Rachel's laugh came out wrong, too high, too sharp. He's going to retaliate. Let him try. The FBI's investigation gave us ammunition, and once the medical board starts looking into his practice, he'll be too busy saving his own career to worry about yours. You don't know men like Brennan. They don't care about consequences when they're angry. They just care about revenge. Morrison pulled out a chair. Rachel, what happened in Kandahar? The question hit like a sucker punch. Rachel's hands clenched. That's not relevant. You lost 11 people. You said it was your fault. But I read the after-action report, the official one. It said the compound was rigged with unconventional explosives. It said the blast pattern was unprecedented. It said you saved 6 soldiers who should have died and the ones you lost were unsavable. So why do you blame yourself? Because I should have seen it sooner. How? You're not psychic. I'm trained. I'm supposed to recognize patterns, and I missed it. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. The soldier who set that IED was a bomb maker who'd spent 15 years perfecting his craft. He designed that trap specifically to kill medics, to exploit the way we're trained to respond. You walked into something designed to murder you, and you still saved 6 lives. That's not failure, Rachel. That's a miracle. Rachel couldn't look at him. The families of the 11 who died don't see it that way. Did you talk to those families? No. Then you're assuming. You're carrying guilt for something that wasn't your fault. And you're so busy punishing yourself that you can't see what everyone else sees. You're one of the best combat medics this military has ever produced. Rachel's throat felt tight. I left. I abandoned my unit. You completed your service. You earned your discharge. And then you tried to disappear because you couldn't forgive yourself for being human. The door opened. A medic stuck her head in. Colonel? Lieutenant? You need to see this. They followed her back to the trauma tent. The 3 soldiers Rachel had saved were awake, sitting up, talking. The female soldier, patient 2, looked up when Rachel entered. You're the doc who saved us? Rachel nodded. The soldier smiled. It was shaky, but real. Thanks for, not letting me die. Just doing my job. Best job I've ever seen. The other 2 soldiers echoed the sentiment. Rachel accepted their thanks with the awkward stiffness of someone who'd forgotten how to receive gratitude. Morrison pulled her aside. The brass wants a full debrief on the blast injuries. They need to know if the experimental program should continue. It shouldn't, Rachel said immediately. The munitions are unstable. The injury patterns are too complex for standard field treatment. If this tech gets deployed and something goes wrong in an active combat zone, people will die. You need to tell them that, officially. They won't listen to me. They will now. You just saved 3 soldiers from injuries their own doctors couldn't treat. You have credibility. Rachel thought about Brennan. about how credibility meant nothing when people were determined not to hear you, but she'd spent 18 months being silent. Being Sarah Mitchell, the invisible floor nurse nobody listened to, maybe Rachel Kincaid needed to be loud. Set up the meeting, she said. Morrison smiled. Already done. Tomorrow. Pentagon. They're flying you to D.C. tonight. What? You're briefing a Joint Chiefs Subcommittee on Experimental Weapons Safety. Congratulations, Lieutenant. You just became very important very quickly. Rachel's stomach twisted. She'd wanted to disappear, wanted to be nobody, and now she was being dragged back into the exact spotlight she'd been running from. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. The text message made her blood run cold. Enjoy your moment, Lieutenant. I've already made calls. People who matter know what you really are. A fraud hiding behind a uniform. Chicago was just the beginning. I'm going to take everything from you. M.B. Marcus Brennan. Rachel showed Morrison the message. His expression went dark. That's harassment, possibly threatening. It's Brennan being Brennan. He doesn't make empty threats. Neither do I. Forward that message to Agent Torres, and let me make some calls of my own. But Rachel was already thinking ahead. Brennan had connections, money, influence, and an ego that wouldn't accept defeat. He'd come after her. That was certain. The question was how much damage he could do before someone stopped him. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. Different number. Lieutenant Kincaid, this is Kelly from St. Augustine Memorial. You need to know something about Dr. Brennan. Something bad. Can we talk? Please, it's urgent. Rachel stared at the message. Morrison read over her shoulder. Could be a trap. Or it could be someone trying to help. You don't know this person. I know she was in that ER. I know she saw what happened. Rachel typed a response. When and where? The reply came immediately. Tonight, 9 p.m. There's a diner on Clark Street called Rosie's. Come alone. And Lieutenant, be careful. Brennan's already made moves you don't know about. You're in more danger than you realize. Morrison read the message. You're not going alone. If I bring backup, she won't talk. Then I'll be backup she doesn't see. Rachel looked at the 3 soldiers she'd saved, looked at the medical equipment she'd improvised, looked at the life she'd built and abandoned and been dragged back into. She'd run from Rachel Kincaid because being her meant facing failure, but being Sarah Mitchell meant letting people like Brennan win. Okay, she said. We do this smart. We find out what Kelly knows. And then we end this before Brennan destroys anyone else. Morrison nodded. For what it's worth. I'm glad you're back. Rachel wasn't sure she agreed, but she was here and running hadn't worked. So maybe it was time to fight. The helicopter lifted off at 1900 hours. Rachel watched Fort McCoy disappear beneath her, watched the trauma tent become a dot, watched the soldiers she'd saved become invisible. She pulled out her phone, looked at Brennan's threatening message. Then she deleted it. Let him come. She'd survived 3 combat tours, enemy fire, and the worst day of her life in Kandahar. Marcus Brennan was just a bully with a medical degree, and Rachel Kincaid had stopped running. The flight to Chicago took 90 minutes. Morrison arranged for a car to meet them at the airfield. They had 2 hours before the meeting at Rosie's diner. Rachel used the time to prepare, made calls, checked records, did the kind of background research she should have done months ago when Brennan first started targeting her. What she found made her hand shake. Morrison. He looked up from his own phone. Yeah? Brennan's had 6 malpractice suits in the last 4 years, all settled quietly, all with NDAs. But I found the court filings before they were sealed. And 3 deaths, 2 permanent disabilities, 1 case where he operated on the wrong patient. The hospital covered everything, paid out millions, buried the complaints. Morrison's jaw clenched. Jesus. There's more. Kelly, the nurse who contacted me, she filed a formal complaint 2 months ago. Sexual harassment, hostile work environment. The hospital put her on administrative leave and Brennan's still working. Where's her complaint now? Buried, like everything else. Morrison was quiet for a long moment. Rachel, this is bigger than one doctor with an ego problem. This is institutional corruption. If the hospital's covering for Brennan, then they're complicit in everything he's done, every patient he's harmed, every staff member he's abused. We need to be careful. These people have resources, legal teams, PR departments designed to destroy whistleblowers. Rachel thought about the 11 soldiers she'd lost, about 18 months of hiding, about watching Brennan hurt people while everyone looked the other way. "I'm done being careful," she said. The diner materialized out of Chicago's industrial sprawl at 8:45. Rosie's looked like it hadn't been updated since 1970-something. Cracked vinyl booths, fluorescent lights with that distinctive flicker, the smell of coffee and grease and desperation. Kelly was already there. Back booth. Nervous eyes scanning the entrance every few seconds. Rachel slid into the seat across from her. Morrison stayed in the car outside, watching through the windows. "You came," Kelly said. "You said it was urgent." Kelly's hands wrapped around a coffee mug like she was trying to draw warmth from something. "Brennan's planning something. I don't know exactly what, but I heard him on the phone today. He was talking about discrediting you, about finding evidence of misconduct, about—" She hesitated. "About what?" "About Kandahar. About what happened there. He said he had sources, people who'd talk, people who'd say you weren't a hero, that you were responsible for those deaths." Rachel's blood went cold. "How does he know about Kandahar?" "He's been digging, hired investigators. He's obsessed, Lieutenant. This isn't about the hospital anymore. This is personal. He wants to destroy you completely." Rachel's mind raced. If Brennan found the right people, the families of the soldiers who died maybe, or other unit members who didn't know the full story, he could build a narrative, could make her look incompetent or reckless, or worse. "Why are you telling me this?" Rachel asked. Kelly met her eyes. "Because I'm tired of watching him hurt people. I filed a complaint and they buried it. Other nurses have tried to speak up and they got fired or pushed out or threatened until they went silent. And patients keep getting hurt, keep dying. And nobody stops him because he's got money and connections, and the hospital needs his reputation more than they need integrity." "What do you want me to do?" "Fight back. You've got military backing. You've got visibility now. You're the first person who stood up to him and lived to tell about it. If you go public, if you expose what he is, maybe the rest of us can finally be heard." Rachel thought about the FBI investigation, about the medical board review, about all the official channels that were supposed to protect people like Kelly. "The system's already investigating him," she said. Kelly laughed, bitter. "The system protects doctors like Brennan. The medical board is full of his friends. The hospital will fight any investigation with lawyers and money and time until everyone gives up or goes broke trying. I've seen it happen. The system doesn't work for people like us." "Then what does work?" Kelly pulled out a flash drive, set it on the table between them. "Evidence. Everything I could find. Medical records Brennan altered, complaints he buried, financial records showing payoffs to keep patients quiet, emails where he brags about manipulating reviews and silencing staff. It's all there." Rachel stared at the drive. "Where did you get this?" "I'm IT certified. Used to work hospital records before Brennan got me transferred to the floor as punishment for rejecting his advances. I kept my access credentials. Nobody thought to revoke them. This is illegal. So is what Brennan's doing. The question is which illegal act you can live with." Rachel picked up the flash drive. It was small, weighed almost nothing, and it represented the kind of decision that could end careers or save lives depending on how she used it. "If I take this public," Rachel said slowly, "Brennan will come after you. Hard. He's already after me. At least this way I'm fighting back." Rachel slipped the drive into her pocket. "I'll need time to verify the contents. Make sure it's admissible. Find the right channels." "There are no right channels." Kelly's voice rose. An older waitress glanced over. Kelly lowered her voice. "Sorry, but you need to understand, the system is the problem. The channels are compromised. The only way to beat Brennan is to take the fight outside the system he controls." Rachel thought about Morrison's warning, about being careful, about institutional resources and legal teams. Then she thought about the teenage girl in the ER, about the 3 soldiers at Fort McCoy, about every patient Brennan had harmed while the system looked the other way. "Okay," Rachel said. "We do this smart, but we do it." Kelly's expression shifted, relief mixed with terror. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. This is going to get ugly." "It's already ugly. Now at least we're doing something about it." Rachel's phone buzzed. "Morrison. Text message. We've got company. Black sedan. 2 occupants. Been circling the block. Could be nothing. Could be surveillance. Your call. Rachel showed Kelly the message. Kelly's face went white. He's having you followed. Or having you followed. Either way, we need to leave, separately. You go first. I'll wait 10 minutes. Rachel stood. Kelly, be careful. If Brennan suspects you gave me this evidence, I know the risks. I'm done being scared. Rachel left through the front entrance. Morrison pulled up 30 seconds later. She climbed into the passenger seat. Black sedan? She asked. 2 o'clock. Don't look directly at it. Rachel used the side mirror. 2 men in suits, professional, patient, the kind of people who got paid to watch and wait and report. Private investigators, she said. Brennan's? Who else? Morrison pulled into traffic. The sedan followed. Not obvious, not close, but definitely tracking. What's the play? Morrison asked. Rachel pulled out the flash drive. We verify this, find out if Kelly's evidence is real, and if it is, we blow Brennan's entire world apart before he can destroy hers. And if it's not real, if it's a setup, then we're about to walk into a trap. Morrison drove in silence for several blocks. The sedan maintained distance. Professional tail, patient. You know this is going to get political, Morrison said. Hospital corruption, military involvement, medical oversight. The media will eat this alive. Good. Let them. Brennan thrives in the dark. Time to turn on the lights. Morrison's phone rang. He put it on speaker. Colonel Morrison. The voice was clipped. Military. This is General Patterson. I need to speak with Lieutenant Kincaid immediately. Rachel's stomach dropped. A general calling Morrison's personal cell at 10 p.m. meant something had gone very wrong. I'm here, sir, Rachel said. Lieutenant, I've received some disturbing information. Allegations regarding your conduct in Kandahar. Questions about the circumstances surrounding the deaths of 11 soldiers under your care. I need you to report to the Pentagon tomorrow morning for a formal inquiry. Rachel's hands clenched. Sir, with respect, what's the source of these allegations? That's not your concern. Your concern is reporting as ordered. General, someone's trying to discredit me. This is retaliation for us. Lieutenant, you're not in a position to question orders. Be at the Pentagon. 0900. Don't be late. The line went dead. Morrison swore quietly. Rachel stared at the flash drive in her hand. Brennan wasn't just coming after her. He'd already made his move, and somehow, impossibly, he'd gotten the Pentagon's attention. The black sedan was still behind them when Morrison turned onto the highway toward the airfield. Rachel watched it in the side mirror, her mind already 3 moves ahead. Brennan got to someone in the Pentagon, she said. Morrison's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. That shouldn't be possible. Military command structure doesn't take calls from civilian doctors with grudges. Unless the doctor knows someone who knows someone, Brennan bragged about having connections. I didn't think he meant flag officers. We need to know who he contacted, how he made this happen. Rachel pulled out her phone and called the one person who might have answers. Agent Torres picked up on the second ring. Lieutenant Kincaid wasn't expecting to hear from you tonight. I need information. Dr. Brennan made a call to someone in military command. Allegations about my service record, about Kandahar. Who would he contact to trigger a formal inquiry? Torres was quiet for a moment. Rachel heard keyboard clicks. Give me a second. I'm pulling his phone records from our investigation. More typing. Rachel counted her heartbeats. 16, 17. Got it, Torres said. Brennan made 3 calls this afternoon. 1 to a law firm in D.C., 1 to a public relations consultant, and 1 to a private number registered to a retired Army general named Howard Castellano. Rachel's blood turned to ice. Morrison looked at her. You know that name? Castellano was the commanding officer who ordered the mission in Kandahar, the one that got my unit hit. He blamed me in the after-action report, said I was reckless, said I ignored intelligence warnings. That's not what the official report says. The official report was sanitized. Castellano's original assessment was buried because it made the brass look bad for greenlighting a flawed mission. But he never forgave me for surviving when his operation fell apart. Torres's voice was sharp. Lieutenant, if this general has a personal vendetta and Brennan gave him ammunition, then tomorrow's inquiry isn't about facts. It's about revenge. Morrison accelerated. The sedan tried to keep pace. We need that flash drive verified. Tonight. If Kelly's evidence is solid, we have leverage. Rachel looked at the small device in her hand. Where? I know a guy. Former NSA. Runs a private security firm now. Owes me a favor. He can analyze the data, verify authenticity, trace any alterations. How long will it take? Couple hours if we're lucky. Rachel checked the time. 22:30. The Pentagon inquiry was in less than 11 hours. Make the call, she said. Morrison did. The conversation was brief. Coordinates, arrival time. Nothing else. The black sedan followed them to the airfield, watched them board the helicopter, made no attempt to intervene. Rachel understood the message. Brennan wanted her to know she was being watched, wanted her afraid. The helicopter lifted off at 2300. Rachel used the flight time to review everything she remembered about Kandahar, every detail, every decision, every second of the worst day of her life. The compound had been a suspected insurgent medical facility. Intelligence said minimal resistance, quick in and out, secure the site, evacuate any wounded civilians, document enemy medical supplies. The intelligence was wrong. The compound was a trap designed specifically to kill American medics. The insurgent bomb maker had studied U.S. medical protocols, knew how they'd respond, knew where they'd set up triage, knew exactly how to maximize casualties among medical personnel. Rachel's team walked into a building rigged with explosives hidden inside medical equipment, inside supply crates, inside the walls themselves. The first blast killed 3 soldiers instantly. The second blast came when Rachel and her team rushed to help the wounded, killed 4 more. The third blast was designed to collapse the building's support structure, would have killed everyone. Rachel had recognized the pattern half a second before it triggered, screamed for evacuation, got 6 people out. 11 didn't make it. Castellano had blamed her for not recognizing the trap sooner, for not questioning the intelligence, for not being psychic enough to know they were walking into a kill box designed by someone who'd spent 15 years perfecting the art of murdering medics. The official inquiry cleared her, but Castellano's original assessment lived somewhere in her service jacket. Buried, but not gone. And now Brennan had dug it up. Morrison's contact operated out of a warehouse in Virginia that looked abandoned from the outside. Inside was military-grade security and enough technology to run a small intelligence operation. David Park was 50-something, Korean-American, with the kind of eyes that saw through deception like X-rays through flesh. He took the flash drive from Rachel without comment. "How dirty are we talking?" he asked. "Medical malpractice, falsified records, financial fraud, sexual harassment, cover-ups at the institutional level." Park whistled. "So just a light Tuesday. Give me 2 hours." Rachel and Morrison waited in a room that was probably designed for exactly this purpose. No windows, soundproof walls, coffee maker that produced something approximating jet fuel. Morrison's phone rang. He checked the caller ID and his expression went flat. "It's the Pentagon. Public Affairs Office." He answered. Put it on speaker. "Colonel Morrison, this is Major Webb. I'm calling regarding Lieutenant Rachel Kincaid. We've received media inquiries, multiple outlets. They're asking about allegations of negligence and misconduct during her deployment, about civilian medical violations. We need to coordinate our response." Rachel's hands clenched. How did the media get this story? Unknown. But it's spreading fast. We've got requests from Washington Post, Chicago Tribune, Military Times, and 3 cable news networks. They want statements by 0600. Morrison's voice was ice. "Major, someone's running a coordinated smear campaign against one of my officers. I need to know where these inquiries originated. I can't disclose." "Major, I'm not asking as a colleague. I'm ordering as Lieutenant Kincaid's commanding officer. Where did this start?" Silence. Then Webb's voice quieter. "The first inquiry came from a PR firm in D.C., Ashton and Cross. They represent high-profile clients, medical professionals, corporate executives, people with money who need their reputations managed." "Brennan hired them," Rachel said. Morrison ended the call. "He's not just coming after you through official channels. He's destroying you in the court of public opinion." Rachel's phone started buzzing. Unknown numbers, text messages, voicemails piling up. She turned it off. "It doesn't matter," she said. "If Park verifies Kelly's evidence, we have enough to bury Brennan. The truth will come out." "Rachel, in my experience, truth and justice don't always arrive together, or arrive at all. Then we make them." Park emerged from his workspace at 02:15. His expression was grim. "You want the good news or the bad news?" "Bad news." Rachel said. The data's been tampered with. Someone tried to alter timestamps and delete certain files. Sloppy work, but effective enough to raise questions about chain of custody. Rachel's stomach dropped. So it's useless. I said that's the bad news. Good news is I recovered everything. The alterations were recent, within the last 6 hours. Whoever did it left digital fingerprints all over the metadata. Morrison leaned forward. Can you trace them? Already did. The alterations came from a hospital IP address. St. Augustine Memorial. Administrative server. Park pulled up a screen. And before you ask, yes, I can prove the original files are authentic. Medical records have embedded verification codes. I cross-referenced them with federal databases. Everything Kelly gave you is real. Rachel felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. So we have evidence. You have evidence that Brennan's a predator who's been protected by institutional corruption for years. You also have evidence that someone at the hospital realized Kelly leaked the files and tried to destroy them, which means Kelly's in danger. Rachel was already dialing Kelly's number. It rang 6 times, went to voicemail. She tried again. Same result. We need to find her, Rachel said. Morrison was already moving. I'll contact Chicago PD, request a welfare check. That'll take too long, and if Brennan's people are watching her... Rachel's phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Stop looking. She's fine. For now. But if you don't back down, if you don't drop this investigation and take your military inquiry like a good soldier, Kelly won't stay fine. Neither will the teenage girl from the ER or the 3 soldiers you saved at Fort McCoy. I can reach all of them. Walk away, Lieutenant. Or people start dying. MB Rachel showed Morrison the message. His face went hard. That's a direct threat. Federal crime. It's also Brennan calling my bluff. He thinks I'll fold to protect them. Will you? Rachel thought about the 11 soldiers in Kandahar. About 18 months of running. About every time she'd stayed silent while Brennan hurt people because speaking up cost too much. No, she said. Forward this to Agent Torres, and let's find Kelly before Brennan does something stupid. Park was already typing. I can track her phone. Give me her number. Rachel provided it. Park's fingers flew across the keyboard. Got her. Last GPS ping was 20 minutes ago. Her apartment in Chicago. Phone's been off since then. Morrison was calling someone. His voice was clipped, urgent. Rachel caught fragments. Federal threat. Witness protection. Immediate extraction. Rachel was already heading for the door. I'm going to Chicago. Rachel, wait. Brennan threatened her because of me. I'm not letting him hurt her. You have a Pentagon inquiry in 7 hours. Then I better fly fast. Morrison caught up with her in the parking lot. You're making this personal. It's been personal since Brennan decided destroying me was worth more than patient safety. If you miss that inquiry, Castellano wins. He'll use your absence as proof of guilt. Rachel stopped. Morrison was right. Missing the inquiry would confirm every accusation, would give Castellano everything he needed to destroy her military career. But Kelly was in danger because she'd tried to help. I can't abandon her, Rachel said. Morrison's expression softened. I know. So we do this smart. I'll go to Chicago. I'll find Kelly. You go to the Pentagon. You face Castellano. And when you're done crushing that inquiry, we'll use Kelly's evidence to obliterate Brennan's entire operation. Morrison! Rachel, you can't save everyone yourself. That's what got you in trouble in Kandahar. That's what's been eating you alive for 18 months. Sometimes you have to trust other people to handle their piece while you handle yours. Rachel wanted to argue, but she'd seen enough battlefield commanders make emotional decisions that got people killed. Morrison was right. Splitting focus meant failing both missions. Find her, Rachel said. Whatever it takes. I will. You focus on the Pentagon. Show them who Rachel Kincaid really is. Morrison left for Chicago. Rachel caught a military transport to D.C., arrived at the Pentagon at 0700 with 2 hours to prepare and no sleep in her system. The inquiry was being held in a conference room designed to intimidate. Long table, formal portraits of military brass staring down from the walls. 5 officers waiting when Rachel entered. General Castellano sat at the center. Older now. Gray hair where there'd been brown, but the same cold eyes that had looked at Rachel in the aftermath of Kandahar and seen failure instead of survival. Lieutenant Kincaid, he said. Punctual. That's something. Rachel stood at attention. Sir? Sit. She sat, kept her spine straight, her expression neutral. Castellano opened a folder. We're here to discuss allegations regarding your conduct during Operation Bright Star, specifically the events of November 7th in Kandahar province. 11 soldiers died under your medical supervision. I want to know why. Rachel had prepared for this, had reviewed every detail, but hearing Castellano frame it as her failure made her hands clench beneath the table. Sir, with respect, the official after-action report, I'm not interested in sanitized reports designed to protect institutional reputation. I'm interested in truth. Did you or did you not ignore intelligence warnings about the compound? There were no warnings. Intelligence indicated minimal resistance. Intelligence indicated a suspected insurgent presence. That should have prompted additional caution. Sir, every compound in that region had suspected insurgent presence. If we treated every mission as high risk, 11 soldiers would still be alive. The room went silent. Rachel forced herself to breathe. General, the compound was rigged by a bomb maker who'd spent 15 years studying U.S. medical protocols. The trap was designed specifically to kill medics. The official inquiry cleared me of negligence. The official inquiry was conducted by people who wanted the incident buried. I was there, Lieutenant. I saw the aftermath. I read your initial reports. You missed signs. You made assumptions. You got people killed. Rachel's voice stayed level. What signs did I miss, sir? Castellano pulled out a document. The compound's layout was inconsistent with typical medical facilities. The supply crates were staged too carefully. The wounded civilians were positioned in a pattern that should have triggered suspicion. All of which we documented in real time, all of which I reported to command before we secured the building. The decision to proceed came from your office, General. Castellano's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting I'm responsible for those deaths? I'm suggesting we both made decisions based on available intelligence. The difference is, I was there when those decisions got people killed. You were 50 miles away in an operations center. The other officers shifted uncomfortably. Castellano's voice went quiet. Dangerous. Lieutenant, I could end your career with one signature. You've been trying to end my career for 18 months, sir. That's why we're here. Because a civilian doctor with a grudge gave you the excuse you needed to finish what you started in Kandahar. Excuse me? Rachel pulled out her phone, set it on the table, played the voicemail Brennan had left 2 days ago, the one where he'd threatened to destroy her, the one where he'd mentioned having military connections who owed him favors. Dr. Marcus Brennan contacted you 3 days ago. He provided you with selective information about my civilian medical work, information designed to make me look incompetent. And you used it to reopen an investigation that was closed 18 months ago. Not because you care about military justice, because you need someone to blame for a failed operation that happened on your watch. Castellano stood. This inquiry is over. No, sir, it's not. Rachel stood as well. Because I have evidence. Testimony from the medics who survived Kandahar. Forensic analysis of the blast patterns. Expert opinions from bomb disposal techs who examined the site. All of it confirms that compound was an unprecedented trap that no one could have predicted. The only reason anyone survived is because I recognized the pattern half a second before the final blast and got 6 people out. Luck, training, experience, and the ability to make decisions under pressure when hesitation means death. The same abilities I demonstrated 2 days ago when I saved 3 soldiers at Fort McCoy from experimental weapons injuries their own field medics couldn't treat. The same abilities I've demonstrated in every combat deployment. So yes, General, 11 soldiers died in Kandahar, and I carry that every day. But I also saved 6, and I've saved dozens more since then. And I'm not going to let you destroy my career because you need a scapegoat for your operational failures. The room was absolutely silent. One of the other officers, a colonel Rachel didn't recognize, spoke. General Castellano, perhaps we should review the documentation Lieutenant Kincaid mentioned before proceeding. Castellano's face was red. This isn't a negotiation. With respect, sir, it's a formal inquiry, which requires evidence, which the lieutenant appears to have provided. Rachel pulled out a flash drive. Not Kelly's. This one contained everything Morrison had helped her compile. Service records, combat citations, survivor testimony, medical analyses. She slid it across the table. The colonel took it. We'll need time to review this. Take all the time you need, Rachel said. I'll be here. Castellano slammed his hand on the table. Lieutenant, you're dismissed. Am I cleared, sir? Or am I still under investigation? The colonel looked at Castellano. General? Castellano's jaw worked. Rachel could see him calculating, weighing options, realizing that pushing this inquiry further would expose his own culpability in the Kandahar operation. Pending review of evidence, he finally said. Dismissed. Rachel saluted, walked out. Her hands didn't start shaking until she reached the hallway. Morrison called 30 seconds later. How'd it go? Still standing. You? Found Kelly. She's safe. Brennan's people were watching her apartment, but we extracted her through a service entrance. FBI's got her in protective custody now. Rachel leaned against the wall. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Kelly says Brennan's not done. He's planning something for today, something big. She overheard him on the phone last night talking about a press conference. Rachel's phone buzzed. News alert. Breaking. Prominent Chicago physician Dr. Marcus Brennan to hold press conference regarding allegations of military misconduct and civilian medical negligence. Live coverage 2 p.m. Eastern. He's going public, Rachel said. We need to beat him to it. Kelly's ready to testify. Park verified all her evidence. We have everything we need to destroy him. Then we hold our own press conference. 1 hour before his. We release everything. Medical records, cover-ups, harassment complaints, all of it. Morrison was quiet. Rachel, are you sure? Once we do this, there's no going back. Brennan will sue. The hospital will sue. This becomes a media circus. Rachel thought about the teenage girl in the ER, about the 3 soldiers at Fort McCoy, about every patient Brennan had harmed while institutions protected him. I'm sure. Okay, I'll set it up, but Rachel, we need you here. Your face, your voice, your story. That's what makes this real. Rachel checked the time. 1,300 hours. She could catch a flight, be in Chicago by 14:30, 30 minutes before Brennan's press conference. I'm on my way. She made it to Chicago at 14:15. Morrison had arranged everything. Small conference room in a downtown hotel. Cameras from local news stations. Print journalists. Enough media presence to matter, but small enough to control. Kelly was there, looking terrified but determined. Park had provided technical documentation. Morrison stood at the back, watching the door. Rachel walked to the podium at exactly 14:30. The cameras turned on. My name is Lieutenant Rachel Kincaid. I served 3 tours with the 3rd Medical Battalion. I saved lives under enemy fire. And 18 months ago, I left the military and tried to disappear because I couldn't forgive myself for the soldiers I couldn't save. She paused. Let that sink in. For the past 6 months, I worked as a floor nurse at St. Augustine Memorial Hospital in Chicago. I worked under Dr. Marcus Brennan, and I watched him harm patients through negligence. I watched him silence staff who questioned his judgment. I watched him create a culture where reputation mattered more than patient safety. She gestured to Kelly. This is Kelly Andrews. She's a nurse at St. Augustine. She tried to file a formal harassment complaint against Dr. Brennan. The hospital buried it. She tried to report safety violations. The hospital ignored them, and when she gathered evidence of systematic corruption, someone tried to destroy it to protect Dr. Brennan. Rachel pulled out Kelly's flash drive, held it up. This contains medical records, financial documents, communications showing years of malpractice, cover-ups, and institutional corruption. We're releasing all of it to media and regulatory authorities. Not because we want attention, because patients deserve the truth, because whistleblowers deserve protection, because people like Dr. Brennan only thrive when good people stay silent. A reporter raised her hand. Lieutenant Kincaid, Dr. Brennan claims you assaulted a patient, that you violated medical protocols. How do you respond? I saved that patient's life. Medical records prove it. FBI investigation confirmed it. Dr. Brennan lied because I made him look incompetent in front of his staff. And when lying didn't work, he tried to destroy my military career by feeding false information to officers with personal grudges. This isn't about medical disagreement. This is about a powerful man who can't accept being wrong. Another reporter. What about the allegations regarding Kandahar? Rachel's throat tightened. 11 soldiers died in Kandahar. I was their medical officer. I couldn't save them. That's something I live with every day. But the official inquiry cleared me. The surviving members of my unit support me, and the only person questioning my conduct is a general who needs someone to blame for an operation that failed due to bad intelligence and inadequate planning. She looked directly at the camera. Dr. Brennan is holding his own press conference in 25 minutes. He's going to claim he's the victim, that I'm unstable, that military oversight failed. He's going to use his reputation and his resources to make this about anything except the truth. Rachel pulled out her phone, displayed Brennan's threatening text message on the screen behind her. This is a message Dr. Brennan sent me last night. He threatened witnesses, threatened patients, threatened vulnerable people to force my silence. That's who he is, not the respected physician, not the hospital administrator, a man willing to hurt innocent people to protect his ego. The room erupted with questions. Rachel answered them methodically, clinically. Every question about Brennan, she redirected to patient safety. Every question about herself, she redirected to institutional accountability. Morrison checked his watch, leaned close to whisper. Brennan's press conference just started. Rachel, you need to see this. Morrison pulled up a live stream on his phone. Brennan stood at a podium in what looked like St. Augustine's administrative conference room. Professional lighting, hospital logo prominently displayed, lawyers flanking him, disturbing allegations from a former employee who has a documented history of mental instability and professional misconduct. Lieutenant Rachel Kincaid served our country, and for that we're grateful. But her transition to civilian life has been marked by concerning behavior. Insubordination, medication errors, violations of patient privacy, and last week an unprovoked assault on a minor patient that could have resulted in serious injury or death. Rachel watched her professional reputation disintegrate in real time. Brennan continued, We've tried to help Ms. Kincaid, offered counseling, offered support, but she's refused assistance and instead launched a vindictive campaign of harassment and defamation. The evidence she's presenting today is falsified, stolen from hospital servers, manipulated to create a narrative that simply doesn't exist. A reporter asked about Kelly's harassment complaint. Brennan's expression was perfectly calibrated sympathy. Ms. Andrews is a troubled individual who's struggling with personal issues. We've tried to accommodate her needs, but unfortunately, her allegations are part of a pattern of erratic behavior. The hospital has documentation showing she's been counseled multiple times for performance issues, attendance problems, and inappropriate conduct. Rachel's hands clenched. Kelly's face had gone white. That's all lies. They're making me sound crazy. Morrison touched Rachel's shoulder. We need to respond. Now. But Rachel was watching the live stream, watching Brennan dismantle everything with practiced precision, watching him turn victim into aggressor with carefully chosen words. Then something changed on screen. The conference room door opened behind Brennan. Agent Torres walked in. Not alone. She had 6 FBI agents with her, and 2 people in suits that Rachel recognized as federal prosecutors. Brennan turned. His confident expression flickered. Torres walked straight to the podium, held up her badge. Dr. Marcus Brennan, you're under arrest for obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent. The cameras went wild. Brennan's lawyers tried to intervene. Torres's team blocked them. This is a mistake, Brennan stammered. You can't just... Torres pulled out handcuffs. We have recordings of your threatening communications. We have evidence of your attempts to destroy federal evidence. We have testimony from multiple witnesses regarding your campaign to obstruct our investigation into St. Augustine Memorial. Turn around, doctor. Brennan looked at the cameras, at his lawyers, at the hospital administrators watching from the sidelines. No one moved to help him. Torres handcuffed him, read him his rights, let him out while cameras captured every second. The hotel conference room where Rachel stood erupted in chaos. Reporters shouting questions, phones ringing. Someone started live streaming Torres's arrest. Rachel couldn't move, couldn't process what she'd just watched. Morrison was grinning. Torres didn't tell us she was ready to move. Kelly started crying. Relief, probably. Or shock. Maybe both. Rachel's phone rang. Torres. Lieutenant Kincaid, you're welcome. I didn't know you were... We've been building a case for 3 days. Your evidence helped, but we had enough even without it. Brennan's arrogance made our job easy. What happens now? Now we dig into St. Augustine Memorial. Board of Directors, Hospital Administration, everyone who enabled Brennan. This is going to be a long investigation. Are you prepared for that? Rachel looked at Kelly, at Morrison, at the reporters still shouting questions. Yeah, she said. I'm prepared. Torres ended the call. A reporter pushed forward. Lieutenant Kincaid, what's your reaction to Dr. Brennan's arrest? Rachel stepped back to the podium. The cameras refocused on her. Justice, she said simply. That's my reaction. Dr. Brennan hurt people for years while institutions protected him. Today that protection ended. Today he faces consequences. And today everyone he silenced gets to be heard. Another reporter. What about your military career, the inquiry? Still under review, but I've provided evidence supporting my conduct. The truth will speak for itself. Will you return to St. Augustine Memorial? Rachel almost laughed. No, my time there is done, but I'll be watching what happens next, making sure the patients he harmed get justice, making sure the staff he abused get protection, making sure this never happens again. The press conference ended 30 minutes later. Rachel walked out to find Morrison waiting in the hallway. You did good, he said. We did good. I couldn't have done this alone. That's the point. You spent 18 months trying to handle everything yourself, trying to be invisible, trying to carry all the guilt and all the responsibility. But you're not alone, Rachel. You never were. Rachel's phone buzzed, text from an unknown number. She almost didn't check it, assumed it was another reporter or another threat or another complication. But something made her look. Lieutenant Kincaid. This is Corporal James Martinez. I was one of the 6 soldiers you saved in Kandahar. I heard about the inquiry, about the allegations. I want you to know that every one of us who survived that day knows the truth. You're the reason we're alive. If you need us to testify, to make statements, to stand up for you the way you stood up for us, we're ready. Just say the word. You saved us. Let us return the favor. Rachel showed Morrison the message. He read it, nodded. See? Not alone. Rachel started typing a response. Her hands were shaking, but this time it wasn't fear. It was something else. Something that felt like the weight she'd been carrying for 18 months finally starting to lift. Before she could finish typing, Morrison's phone rang. He answered, listened. His expression changed. When? He asked. Then, how many? Then, we're on our way. He ended the call and looked at Rachel. Fort McCoy, the 3 soldiers you saved, they're crashing. All 3. Same symptoms. The experimental munitions exposure is causing delayed complications the field medics can't handle. They need you there. Now. Rachel's response died on her lips. How long do we have? Medevac helicopters waiting. They're saying hours, not days. Rachel looked at her phone, at Martinez's message, at the promise of soldiers willing to save her career the way she'd saved their lives. But 3 different soldiers were dying. Right now. Because she'd stabilized them but hadn't solved the underlying problem. Let's go, she said. They ran. The helicopter blades were already spinning when Rachel and Morrison reached the airfield. They climbed aboard without ceremony, without clearance checks, without anything except the knowledge that 3 soldiers were dying and time was a luxury nobody had. The flight to Fort McCoy took 78 minutes. Rachel spent them reviewing everything she knew about the experimental munitions exposure. The initial treatment had worked. Stabilization protocols had succeeded. But something was happening now, something delayed, something her first assessment had missed. Morrison was on his phone coordinating with the base medical staff. His voice was clipped, efficient. Rachel caught fragments. Secondary exposure symptoms and cascading organ failure and hepatorenal syndrome. Her mind raced through possibilities. Chemical weapons sometimes had biphasic toxicity, initial symptoms followed by a latent period, then catastrophic system collapse. But the experimental munitions weren't supposed to be chemical. They were described as suppression technology, thermal and kinetic combined. Unless the brass had lied about what they were testing. The helicopter touched down at 2200 hours. The base was lit up like a combat zone. Ambulances, medical personnel running. That particular organized chaos that meant multiple critical patients and not enough hands. Rachel hit the ground before the skids settled. A medic she recognized from her first visit, the sergeant with blood on his fatigues, ran up. Lieutenant, thank God. They're all 3 crashing. We've tried everything from your initial protocol, but nothing's working. Show me. The trauma tent was worse than before. All 3 soldiers on ventilators now, monitors screaming. The female soldier, patient 2, was seizing despite maximal anticonvulsant therapy. Patient 1's liver enzymes were skyrocketing. Patient 3 had developed acute kidney failure. Rachel moved to the first patient and started her assessment. Pupils, reflexes, skin condition. She'd missed something. Had to have missed something. Talk me through their progression, she said while examining patient 1. The sergeant pulled up charts. They were stable for 36 hours. Then patient 2 started with tremors. Mild at first. We thought it was anxiety. But it progressed to full seizures within 2 hours. Started her on diazepam, then phenytoin, then propofol. Nothing touched it. Rachel checked the seizure pattern on the EEG. Not typical epileptiform activity. Something else. Something that looked almost like, when did patient 1's liver values start climbing? 6 hours after patient 2's seizures started. And patient 3's kidney function? 4 hours after that. Sequential failure, not simultaneous. Rachel's mind clicked through the pattern. This wasn't random organ damage. This was a progression, a cascade triggered by something specific. She pulled back patient 1's eyelid. The scleral hemorrhaging she'd noticed before had worsened, tiny blood vessels rupturing throughout the eye. Get me a full coagulation panel on all 3 patients. And I need tissue samples from the blast wounds. Fresh samples, not the ones from 3 days ago. A medic hesitated. Ma'am, taking tissue samples from active wounds could cause additional trauma. They're dying anyway. I need to know what's in their system, now. The medic moved. Morrison appeared at Rachel's elbow. What are you thinking? The munitions weren't just thermal and kinetic. There's a chemical component, something that's metabolizing slowly. The initial exposure caused acute symptoms, but now it's breaking down in their bodies, and the metabolites are more toxic than the original compound. Can you treat it? Not if I don't know what it is. Morrison pulled out his phone, started making calls. Rachel heard him demand classified weapons specifications, threaten officers with obstruction charges, invoke emergency medical authority. The tissue samples came back 15 minutes later. Rachel examined them under the field microscope. The wound beds showed crystalline deposits, microscopic, embedded in the tissue itself. She'd seen something similar once. Iraq, a soldier exposed to experimental incendiary rounds that contained magnesium phosphorus composites. The burn wounds had seemed stable until the embedded particles started oxidizing in the tissue. I need chelation therapy. EDTA, dimercaprol if you have it, and activated charcoal for gastric decontamination, even though the exposure was dermal. The sergeant looked skeptical. Ma'am, chelation therapy is for heavy metal poisoning. These munitions contain metallic compounds that are breaking down and releasing ions. The ions are crossing the blood-brain barrier, damaging liver cells, destroying kidney function. We need to bind them and flush them out before the cascade becomes irreversible. Morrison ended his call. I've got someone from the weapons development program on the way. ETA 30 minutes. But Rachel, they're not going to tell you what's in those munitions. It's classified. Then people die. I know, I'm working on it. Rachel started the chelation protocol on patient 1. High-dose calcium EDTA. The theory was sound. The execution was guesswork. She had no idea if the metallic compounds in the experimental munitions would even respond to standard chelation agents. Patient 2's seizures intensified. Rachel moved to her bedside. The EEG pattern was deteriorating, brain activity becoming more chaotic. She'd seen this before in soldiers with traumatic brain injuries, the cascade toward brain death. Increase the propofol, she ordered, and start therapeutic hypothermia. We need to slow her brain metabolism. Ma'am, therapeutic hypothermia protocols require. I know what they require. Start cooling, now. The medic scrambled. Patient 3's blood pressure started dropping. Rachel checked his cardiac monitor. Arrhythmia. The kidney failure was causing electrolyte imbalances severe enough to disrupt his heart rhythm. Get me an emergency dialysis setup. Portable, if that's all we have. Lieutenant, we don't have dialysis equipment. Then improvise like we did last time. Find me tubing, find me a pump, Find me something that can filter blood. These soldiers don't get to die because we're missing equipment. Morrison stepped in. I'll handle it. You focus on keeping them alive. He left at a run. Rachel moved between the three patients like she was conducting triage in a mass casualty event, adjusting ventilator settings, titrating medications, monitoring vitals. Her hands moved with mechanical precision, but her mind was racing. She was missing something. The chelation should be working. The cooling should be helping. The supportive care should be enough. But all three patients were still deteriorating. A captain Rachel didn't recognize entered the tent. Older, 50s, wearing a uniform that said weapons development. Behind him, two civilians in expensive suits carrying classified briefcases. Lieutenant Kincaid, the captain said. Busy. I'm Captain Reynolds, Weapons Research Division. I understand you need information about the experimental munitions. Rachel didn't look up from patient two's monitor. I need the exact chemical composition. I need to know what's breaking down in their bodies. And I need to know right now because in about 20 minutes, these soldiers are going to be too far gone to save. Reynolds glanced at the civilians. They shook their heads. I'm sorry, Lieutenant. That information is classified above your clearance level. Rachel's hands stilled. She turned to face Reynolds. Captain, I'm the only medical officer in a 100-mile radius who has any idea how to treat these injuries. If you don't give me the information I need, 3 soldiers die. And when they die, I'm going to make sure everyone knows it's because you chose secrecy over their lives. Lieutenant, you don't understand the sensitive nature. I understand that you tested experimental weapons on American soldiers without adequate medical oversight. I understand that you're more worried about protecting your research than protecting the people who volunteered to test it. And I understand that if you walk out of this tent without giving me what I need, I'm going to have Colonel Morrison contact every media outlet that covered my press conference today and tell them exactly why these soldiers died. Reynolds' face went red. That's a threat. It's a promise. Your call, Captain. One of the civilians stepped forward. Lieutenant, even if we wanted to provide that information, the approval process would take hours, days potentially. We'd need authorization from... Then get it. Now. Or explain to their families why you let them die to protect a weapons program. The civilian and Reynolds exchanged looks. Reynolds pulled out his phone, walked to the corner of the tent, made a call. Rachel went back to patient 2. The seizures were slowing, but her brain activity was dangerously low. The cooling was working, but maybe too well. Rachel adjusted the temperature target, trying to find the narrow window between brain protection and hypothermic complications. Patient 1's liver values were still climbing despite the chelation. Rachel increased the EDTA dose, pushed it to the maximum safe range, then pushed it further. Morrison returned with a makeshift dialysis setup. It looked like something assembled from spare parts in desperation. Will this work? He asked. It'll have to. They connected patient 3 to the improvised system, started pulling his blood, filtering it, returning it. The process was crude but functional. His electrolytes started stabilizing. The arrhythmia improved. One crisis partially contained. Reynolds came back. His expression was grim. I've been authorized to provide limited information. The munitions contain a palladium-osmium alloy designed to create sustained thermal effects. When the alloy oxidizes in tissue, it releases osmium tetroxide, which is extremely toxic, Rachel finished. Volatile. Causes severe damage to eyes, respiratory system, kidneys, and it's heavier than air, so it concentrates in dependent tissues. Reynolds nodded. The weapons were supposed to be stable. The alloy wasn't supposed to oxidize under normal conditions. These aren't normal conditions. These are human bodies with active inflammatory responses trying to heal blast wounds. The oxidative stress from the healing process is triggering the alloy breakdown. Can you treat it? Rachel's mind was already working through the chemistry. Osmium tetroxide. Chelation wouldn't work effectively. But there were reducing agents, compounds that could convert the toxic tetroxide back to less harmful osmium compounds. I need sodium thiosulfate, industrial quantities, and I need it immediately. That's a photography chemical. It's also a reducing agent, and it's used to treat cyanide poisoning, which works on similar oxidative principles. Get it here, now. Reynolds made another call. 20 minutes later, a supply truck arrived carrying drums of sodium thiosulfate solution normally used in base photo labs. Rachel prepared IV formulations, calculated doses based on body weight and estimated osmium exposure. She started the infusions. The first 20 minutes showed no change. Patient 2's seizures continued. Patient 1's liver continued failing. Patient 3's kidneys remained barely functional even with dialysis support. Rachel watched the monitors, counted heartbeats, calculated odds. Then patient 2's seizures started to slow. Not dramatically, not obviously, but the EEG pattern shifted, became slightly less chaotic. Patient 1's liver enzymes plateaued, stopped climbing. Patient 3's kidney function showed the first signs of improvement. Rachel didn't celebrate, too early, too uncertain, but the trajectory had changed. Morrison was watching over her shoulder. It's working. Maybe. Or maybe they've just hit their nadir and would have stabilized anyway. You don't believe that. Rachel didn't, but she'd learned not to count victories before patients actually survived. The next 2 hours were a war of attrition, small improvements followed by setbacks, incremental progress measured in decimal points of lab values. Rachel adjusted treatments constantly, responding to every change, every complication. At 0200, patient 2 opened her eyes. The medics erupted in quiet celebration. Rachel kept her expression neutral, but something in her chest loosened slightly. By 0400, all 3 patients were stable, not recovered, not out of danger, but stable enough that Rachel could step back without immediately returning to crisis management. She walked outside the tent. The night air was cold, clear. She could see stars. Morrison followed her out. You did it again. We did it. You got the dialysis equipment. Reynolds got the chemical specs. The medics executed the protocols. Rachel, stop deflecting. You saved them. You figured out what nobody else could figure out. You improvised treatments that don't exist in any manual. That's not luck. That's skill. Rachel was too tired to argue. Her phone buzzed. Multiple notifications. She'd turned it off during the crisis. Now she turned it back on. 47 missed calls, 63 text messages, 20 voicemails. She scrolled through them. Most were reporters. Some were military personnel she'd served with. A few were from numbers she didn't recognize. One was from Agent Torres. Lieutenant, major developments. St. Augustine Memorial's board just voted to terminate their CEO and 3 senior administrators. Federal investigation expanding to include Medicare fraud and conspiracy. Brennan singing like a canary, giving up everyone who helped him. This is bigger than we thought. Call me. Rachel called. Torres answered immediately. You're alive. Good. What's happening? Brennan's lawyer cut a deal. Full cooperation in exchange for reduced charges. Brennan's providing documentation on systematic fraud at St. Augustine. Turns out the hospital's been billing for procedures that were never performed, using unqualified staff for complex cases, falsifying quality metrics for insurance purposes. It's a RICO case now. How deep does it go? Deep enough that the Department of Justice is involved. We're talking dozens of people, hospital administrators, board members, even some physicians who weren't directly involved but knew what was happening and stayed quiet. Rachel thought about the culture at St. Augustine, the silence, the willingness to overlook problems, the institutional pressure to protect reputation over patients. What about the patients, she asked, the ones Brennan harmed? Victims' Rights Unit is reaching out. They'll be offered compensation, counseling, and they'll have the option to provide impact statements when this goes to trial. When's the trial? Months away, maybe a year. These cases take time, but Brennan's not walking away from this. Neither are the people who enabled him. Rachel ended the call. Morrison was watching her. Good news? Justice. Which isn't always the same as good, but it's something. Her phone rang again. Different number. Military prefix. She answered. Kincaid. Lieutenant, this is Colonel Price from the Pentagon Inquiry Board. I'm calling to inform you that General Castellano has withdrawn all allegations. The inquiry is closed. Your record is clear. Rachel's breath caught. Sir, we reviewed the evidence you provided, spoke with the Kandahar survivors, examined the original operational planning documents. It's clear that the compound ambush was the result of intelligence failure at the command level, not medical negligence. General Castellano has submitted his retirement papers effective immediately. Rachel couldn't speak. Price continued. Furthermore, the Joint Chiefs are requesting your presence at a ceremony next week. They're awarding you the Distinguished Service Medal for your actions at Fort McCoy. 3 soldiers alive because of your intervention. That's the kind of medical achievement that deserves recognition. I was just doing my job, sir. That's what all the best officers say. Congratulations, Lieutenant. Your country is proud of you. The line went dead. Rachel stood there holding her phone. Morrison was grinning. Let me guess. Good news this time? Castellano retired. The inquiry's over. Morrison's grin widened. He saw the evidence and realized he couldn't win. Smart move. Late, but smart. Rachel's phone buzzed again. Text message from Kelly. Lieutenant, I just gave testimony to federal investigators. 6 hours of questions. They recorded everything. Said my evidence was crucial. Said other hospital staff are coming forward now too. People who were too scared before. We're not scared anymore. Thank you for showing us it was possible to fight back. Rachel showed Morrison the message. He read it and nodded. That's how institutions change. One person stands up, then another, then another. Pretty soon the silence breaks and the truth comes out. Or the institution crushes everyone and nothing changes. Sometimes, but not this time. They walked back into the trauma tent. The 3 soldiers were resting, vitals stable. Monitors quiet except for the steady beep of healthy heart rhythms. The female soldier, patient 2, was awake. She saw Rachel and smiled weakly. You again, she said. Her voice was hoarse from the ventilator. Me again. Heard you had a rough couple days. Rachel almost laughed. You heard about that while you were unconscious and dying? Medics talk. Said you took down some doctor who was threatening you. Said you faced down a general. Said you basically told the entire system to screw itself. Something like that. The soldier's expression grew serious. I'm glad you did. People like you, people who actually give a damn, we need more of you, not fewer. Rachel didn't know what to say to that. Patient 1 spoke up from his gurney. Lieutenant, when I get out of here, I'm requesting transfer to any unit you're assigned to. Figure if you can save us from experimental weapons gone wrong, you can probably handle whatever else the military throws at us. Patient 3 nodded agreement. Rachel felt something unfamiliar. Took her a moment to identify it. Pride. Not the arrogant kind. The quiet kind that came from knowing you'd done something that mattered. Morrison pulled her aside. Rachel, we need to talk about your next assignment. I'm still assigned to the 3rd Medical Battalion. Actually, you're not. Your orders came through while you were treating the patients. You're being reassigned to the Army Medical Research Division. They want you developing new protocols for experimental weapons exposure, consulting on safety procedures, making sure what happened at Fort McCoy doesn't happen again. Rachel blinked. That's a desk job. That's a leadership position, policy level, the kind of work that saves lives before they're in danger instead of after. I'm a field medic. I work trauma. You're a medical officer who just exposed massive institutional corruption, saved multiple patients through unconventional interventions, and forced the Pentagon to change how they approach experimental weapons testing. You've outgrown field medicine. Time to think bigger. Rachel wanted to argue, but she thought about the 3 soldiers, about Kelly and the other hospital staff finding their voices, about systems changing because someone pushed back. Maybe Morrison was right. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Is this Lieutenant Rachel Kincaid? A woman's voice, older, unfamiliar. Yes. My name is Margaret Foster. My son was Corporal David Foster. He died in Kandahar, in the compound. Rachel's blood went cold. Ma'am, I wanted to thank you. Rachel stopped. What? The other survivors. The ones you saved. They reached out to me, to all the families. Told us what really happened that day. Told us about the trap. About how you got 6 people out when you should have all died. Told us you've been carrying guilt for 18 months over something that wasn't your fault. Rachel couldn't speak. Margaret continued, My son's death destroyed me. But knowing that you saved his friends, knowing that 6 mothers didn't have to get the same call I got, that helps. It doesn't fix it, but it helps. So thank you, Lieutenant, for saving the ones you could save and for caring about the ones you couldn't. Rachel's throat was too tight for words.
I heard about the inquiry, Margaret said, about General Castellano trying to blame you. I'm glad it's over. I'm glad the truth came out. And I hope you can forgive yourself now, because we forgive you. All of us. The families. We don't blame you. We never did. The call ended. Rachel stood there holding her phone. Her vision was blurring. Morrison touched her shoulder. You okay? I don't know. That's fair. They stood in silence for a moment. Then Rachel's phone buzzed one more time. Email notification. She checked it reflexively. The sender was listed as St. Augustine Memorial Hospital, Legal Department. The subject line read, Formal Settlement Offer and Non-Disclosure Agreement. Rachel opened it. The email was from hospital lawyers. They were offering her a substantial financial settlement, 6 figures, in exchange for her silence about Brennan, about the hospital's practices, about everything she'd witnessed. The email ended with the deadline, 24 hours to accept. After that, the offer was void and the hospital would pursue all available legal remedies against her for defamation and breach of contract. Rachel showed Morrison. He read it and his expression went dark. They're trying to buy your silence. They're threatening me if I don't take it. You're not seriously considering this. Rachel thought about the federal investigation, about Kelly's testimony, about the other staff coming forward. If I take this settlement, I have to sign an NDA. I can't testify, can't speak publicly, can't help the investigation. Exactly, which is why they're making the offer. They want to cut you out of the case before you can do more damage. Rachel looked at the amount. It was enough money to change her life, enough to pay off student loans, enough to start over somewhere new, enough to walk away from all of this and never look back. 18 months ago, she would have taken it, would have grabbed the escape route and run, but she'd stopped running. She hit reply and typed 3 words. Decline? See you in court. She sent it. Morrison read over her shoulder and smiled. That's going to make them angry. Good. I'm tired of people getting away with things because nobody's willing to fight back. You know they'll come after you, lawsuits, depositions. They'll try to destroy your credibility. Let them try. I've got the truth, and I've got people willing to stand with me. That's more than they have. Morrison's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression shifting. When? He asked. Then, are you certain? Then, we'll be there. He ended the call and looked at Rachel. That was the Fort McCoy base commander. There's been a development. The weapons program that created the experimental munitions, it just got shut down. Congressional Oversight Committee. Immediate termination. All ongoing research halted. Because of what happened here? Because of you, your treatment protocols, your testimony about the dangers. It went up the chain, and for once, the chain actually listened. Rachel thought about the 3 soldiers sleeping in the trauma tent, about the program that had nearly killed them being terminated before it could kill anyone else. That was something. That mattered. Morrison's expression grew serious. Rachel, there's something else. The base commander said there was a 4th test subject, someone who was exposed to the experimental munitions but wasn't at Fort McCoy during the initial incident. They've been in a civilian hospital in Milwaukee, symptomatic for the past 12 hours, deteriorating rapidly. Why wasn't I told about this earlier? Because it's not a soldier. It's a civilian contractor, weapons researcher who was present during the test. The hospital's been treating it as unexplained organ failure. They have no idea about the munitions exposure. Rachel grabbed her jacket. How fast can we get to Milwaukee? Helicopter's fueling now. 15 minutes. They ran. But Rachel's phone buzzed one final time before they reached the airfield. Another email. Different sender this time. The address was a string of random characters, encrypted. The message had no subject line. Rachel opened it. Inside was a single attachment. A video file. She played it. The video showed a hospital room. St. Augustine Memorial based on the wall markings. The timestamp was from 3 days ago, the night Brennan had threatened her. The footage showed Brennan entering the teenage girl's room, the patient Rachel had saved. The girl was asleep, recovering from her injuries. Brennan stood over her bed for a long moment. Then he reached for her IV line. Rachel's blood turned to ice. The video showed Brennan injecting something into the IV port, something from a syringe he'd brought with him, then leaving the room.
The video ended. A second email arrived. Same encrypted sender. He tried to kill her. Tried to make it look like a complication from her injuries. Tried to frame you for a bad outcome. But the night shift nurse noticed the girl crashing and intervened before the injection could work. The hospital covered it up. Buried the incident. Paid off the nurse. I kept the security footage. Thought you should have it. Brennan doesn't just destroy careers, he destroys lives. Make sure everyone knows. A friend. Rachel stared at the phone. Morrison had stopped. What is it? Rachel showed him the video. Morrison watched. His face went pale, then red, then something beyond anger. He tried to murder that girl to discredit you. And the hospital covered it up. This is attempted murder. Federal evidence. This changes everything. Rachel forwarded the video to Agent Torres, to the federal prosecutors, to every authority she could think of. Her phone rang immediately. Torres. Where did you get this? Anonymous source, but the timestamp and location metadata should be verifiable. If this is authentic, Rachel, this puts Brennan away for decades. Attempted murder of a minor. We can prove intent. Prove he was trying to harm a patient to frame you. This is beyond medical malpractice. This is premeditated violence. Make sure the girl knows, Rachel said. Make sure she and her family know what he tried to do. They deserve the truth. Already on it. And Rachel, thank you for not giving up, for fighting back, for showing everyone that standing up to people like Brennan is possible. The call ended. Morrison looked at Rachel. We need to get to Milwaukee. That researcher is still dying. Rachel nodded, but she was thinking about the video, about how close Brennan had come to killing an innocent girl just to win an argument, about how many other times he might have crossed that line without anyone noticing. They boarded the helicopter. As they lifted off, Rachel's phone buzzed one last time. Text from an unknown number. You win, Lieutenant. But this isn't over. There are more like Brennan, more institutions protecting predators, more systems designed to silence people like you. You can't fight them all. Eventually, you'll lose. Everyone does. Anonymous. Rachel deleted the message. Maybe the sender was right. Maybe she couldn't fight every battle. Maybe she would eventually lose. But not today. Today, 3 soldiers were alive. Today, Brennan was in custody. Today, a corrupt hospital was being dismantled. Today, the truth was winning. Tomorrow would bring new battles. But tomorrow could wait. The helicopter banked toward Milwaukee, and Rachel closed her eyes for just a moment, letting herself feel the weight of the past 4 days finally starting to lift. Then she opened them again and started reviewing treatment protocols for osmium tetroxide exposure. Because somewhere in Milwaukee, a patient was dying. And Rachel Kincaid didn't quit. The Milwaukee hospital was smaller than St. Augustine, older, with that particular smell of disinfectant and desperation that Rachel had learned to recognize in failing institutions. They arrived at 0300 to find the ICU in barely controlled chaos. The civilian contractor, Dr. Philip Weston, 47, weapons researcher, was coding when Rachel pushed through the doors. His wife stood outside the room, mascara streaked, hands shaking. She looked at Rachel with the kind of hope that came from having no other options left. Rachel didn't stop to introduce herself. She went straight to Weston's bedside. The attending physician, a tired-looking woman in her 50s, was running the code. Epinephrine chest compressions. Standard ACLS protocol that wasn't working because this wasn't a standard cardiac arrest. How long? Rachel asked. The attending looked up, irritated at the interruption. Who are you? Morrison flashed his military ID. She's the specialist you requested, Lieutenant Kincaid. She's treated this exact exposure. How long has he been down? 4 minutes. We've pushed 3 rounds of epi, shocked him twice. Stop compressions, Rachel said. The attending blinked. What? Stop. You're treating cardiac arrest, but his heart isn't the problem. His lungs are filling with osmium tetroxide metabolites. You're pumping oxygenated blood, but there's no oxygen to pump. The compressions are futile. I'm not stopping a code on the say-so of, then watch him die. Your choice. Rachel moved to the medication cart. Found what she needed. Started preparing an infusion of sodium thiosulfate. Same protocol that had worked at Fort McCoy. Same chemistry that had saved 3 soldiers. The attending watched, frozen between protocol and intuition. Rachel hung the infusion bag, connected it to Weston's IV, started the drip. "If this doesn't work in 90 seconds, you can resume compressions," she said. "But give me 90 seconds." The room held its breath. Rachel watched the monitor, watched Weston's heart rhythm, watched for any sign that the reducing agent was binding the toxic osmium compounds, converting them to something his body could handle. 60 seconds. Nothing. 70 seconds. Still nothing. 80 seconds. The monitor blipped. Once. Then again. Weston's heart found a rhythm. Weak, irregular, but present. His oxygen saturation started climbing. 53%, 59, 64. The attending stared at the monitor like it was performing a magic trick. Rachel didn't celebrate. She increased the sodium thiosulfate rate, added chelation therapy, started therapeutic cooling to protect his brain from the hypoxic damage he'd already sustained. The next hour was a fight. Weston stabilized, then crashed, then stabilized again. His wife watched from the hallway, not allowed in during the crisis, seeing just enough through the window to understand her husband was balanced on a knife's edge. Rachel worked with the mechanical focus she'd perfected in combat zones. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Every decision made with the understanding that failure meant a woman became a widow. By 0500, Weston was stable enough to breathe on his own. By 0600, his organ function was improving. By 0700, he opened his eyes. His wife was allowed in. She collapsed against his bedside, sobbing. Weston's hand, weak, trembling, touched her hair. Rachel stepped back. Let them have their moment. The attending pulled Rachel aside. "I've been practicing medicine for 26 years. I've never seen anything like that. Hopefully you never will again. The weapons program that caused this exposure is being shut down." "How did you know what to do?" Rachel thought about Kandahar, about the soldiers at Fort McCoy, about 18 months of carrying guilt for the people she couldn't save while forgetting to credit herself for the ones she could. "Experience," she said, "and stubbornness." Morrison was waiting in the hallway. "Weston's going to make it?" "If there are no complications, he'll need continued chelation therapy, monitoring for delayed toxicity, but yes, he should survive." "That's 4 for 4, Rachel. 4 patients everyone else had given up on. 4 lives saved because you wouldn't accept failure." Rachel's phone buzzed. Text from Agent Torres. Brennan just tried to recant his testimony. Said he was coerced. Said the evidence was fabricated. His lawyers are claiming the arrest video was staged. They're trying for a mistrial before this even gets to trial. Rachel showed Morrison. He swore quietly. Can he do that? His lawyers can try. Whether it works depends on the judge. Another text from Torres. Need you to provide a sworn statement about the attempted murder video. Need documented timeline of events. Need you available for depositions. This case is about to get ugly. Rachel was tired, bone deep, exhausted. She'd been operating on adrenaline and coffee for 4 days. Her hands were starting to shake from fatigue. But Brennan was still fighting, still trying to escape consequences, still willing to burn everything down to save himself. Tell Torres I'll be there, Rachel said. Whatever she needs. Morrison's phone rang. He answered, listened, his expression shifting through several emotions Rachel couldn't quite read. Understood, he said. We'll be there. He ended the call. That was the Pentagon. The Joint Chiefs want to see you, today, 1600 hours. For the medal ceremony? No, that's next week. This is something else. They wouldn't say what over the phone. Rachel's stomach tightened. That sounds ominous. Or it sounds like you've gotten the attention of people who can actually change things. Come on, we need to get you cleaned up and presentable. You look like you've been awake for 4 days. I have been awake for 4 days. Well, try not to look like it when you're meeting with 4-star generals. They caught a flight to D.C. at noon. Rachel slept on the plane, deep, dreamless sleep born of complete exhaustion. Morrison woke her 30 minutes before landing. She changed into a clean uniform in the airport bathroom, looked at herself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked older than she remembered, harder, but also more solid, more certain. Sarah Mitchell had been soft, quiet, easy to overlook. Rachel Kincaid was none of those things. The Pentagon meeting was held in a conference room that radiated power. 4 generals, 3 admirals. The Surgeon General of the Army, the commanding officer of Army Medical Command. Rachel stood at attention while they reviewed files, her service record, her recent actions, the experimental weapons report, the St. Augustine investigation. The Surgeon General spoke first. Lieutenant Kincaid, we've been reviewing your conduct over the past week. Unauthorized medical interventions, conflicts with civilian hospital administration, public statements about classified military programs, insubordination with superior officers. Do you have anything to say about these charges? Rachel's heart was pounding, but her voice stayed level. No, sir. Everything I did, I'd do again. One of the admirals leaned forward. Even the parts that violated protocol? Especially those parts, sir, because protocol was getting people killed. The room was silent. The Surgeon General's expression was unreadable. You understand that we can't have medical officers making unauthorized decisions based on personal judgment? With respect, sir, that's exactly what combat medics do. We make judgment calls in situations where waiting for authorization means people die. I did that in Iraq, in Afghanistan, at Fort McCoy, in Milwaukee. The only difference was the location. The difference was you weren't under fire. You had time to follow proper channels. Did I? The 3 soldiers at Fort McCoy were crashing. The weapons program wouldn't release critical information. The civilian researcher in Milwaukee was coding. When exactly should I have stopped treating patients to fill out paperwork? Another general, older, with deep lines around his eyes, smiled slightly. You're not making this easy for us, Lieutenant. I'm not trying to make it easy, sir. I'm trying to do what's right. The Surgeon General set down his file. Lieutenant Kincaid, we called you here because the military is facing a crisis. Medical officers are leaving at record rates. Morale is low. Trust in leadership is declining. We need people who can bridge the gap between battlefield medicine and institutional oversight. People who understand both. People who are willing to challenge systems when systems fail. Rachel wasn't sure where this was going. We're offering you a position, he continued. Medical Policy and Oversight Division. You'd be responsible for developing new protocols for unconventional exposures, reviewing experimental programs for medical safety, training the next generation of combat medics. And yes, telling generals when they're about to do something stupid that gets soldiers killed. Rachel blinked. Sir, we need officers who put patient care above politics, who have the courage to speak up and the competence to back it up. You've proven you're both. The question is whether you're interested. Rachel thought about the offer. A desk job, policy work, no more battlefield medicine, no more trauma bays, no more split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death, but also no more watching people die from preventable causes because systems were broken and nobody fixed them. What's the rank? She asked. Major, immediate promotion, command authority over all military medical research safety protocols. Major, 2 ranks up, the kind of promotion that usually took years. I'll need autonomy, Rachel said. Real authority, not just advisory. If I see a program that's unsafe, I need the power to shut it down. The Surgeon General exchanged glances with the other officers. That's a lot of authority for a junior officer. Then promote someone senior who has experience saving soldiers from experimental weapons gone wrong. Oh wait, you can't, because I'm the only one who's done it, twice, in 1 week. The admiral who'd smiled earlier laughed outright. I like her. The Surgeon General nodded slowly. All right, Major Kincaid, you'll have your authority. But understand, with power comes scrutiny. Your decisions will be questioned, your methods will be challenged, you'll make enemies among people who don't like being told no. I've already got those enemies, sir. Might as well have the rank to fight them properly. Then welcome to Medical Policy and Oversight. You start Monday. Rachel saluted. Yes, sir. The meeting ended. Rachel walked out into the Pentagon corridors with Morrison beside her. Major Kincaid, Morrison said, has a nice ring to it. I haven't accepted yet. Rachel, you argued your way into a command position and a 2-rank promotion. You accepted the moment you walked into that room. He was right. Rachel's phone buzzed. News alert. Breaking. St. Augustine Memorial Hospital. CEO indicted on 47 federal charges. Hospital board dissolves. Institution placed under federal receivership pending investigation. Another alert. Chicago physician Dr. Marcus Brennan denied bail. Judge cites flight risk and danger to public. Trial set for October. Another. Whistleblower nurse Kelly Andrews receives federal protection. Multiple hospital staff coming forward with additional testimony against Brennan and St. Augustine administration. Rachel scrolled through the updates. Watched the institution that had protected Brennan for years collapse in real time. Morrison read over her shoulder. Justice. Accountability, Rachel corrected. Justice is what the patients get when this goes to trial. This is just the beginning. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Rachel almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. Lieutenant Kincaid? A young woman's voice. Familiar. Yes? This is Emma Walsh, the patient from the ER. The one you saved. Rachel's breath caught. Emma, how are you? Alive. Thanks to you, I heard what Dr. Brennan tried to do, what he almost did to me. The FBI told my parents. They showed us the video. I'm sorry you had to see that. I'm not. I'm glad I know. I'm glad everyone knows what he is. Emma's voice cracked slightly. I wanted to say thank you for saving me twice, once from my injuries, once from him. You don't need to thank me. Yes, I do. You didn't know me. You could have walked away, could have let Dr. Brennan win. But you fought for me anyway. That matters. That changes things. Rachel didn't know what to say. Emma continued. I'm going to medical school, decided last week. I want to be like you, someone who fights for patients when nobody else will, someone who doesn't back down just because the system says to. Emma, medical school is brutal. The training is hard. The pressure is constant. And you'll see things that I already saw things. I almost died. I was almost murdered by someone who was supposed to heal me. If I can survive that, I can survive medical school. And when I'm a doctor, I'm going to make sure people like Dr. Brennan never get away with hurting patients, because someone showed me it was possible to fight back. The call ended. Rachel stood there in the Pentagon hallway, holding her phone, feeling something shift in her chest. The guilt she'd carried for 18 months, the weight of the 11 soldiers she couldn't save, didn't disappear. Probably never would. But it was lighter now, balanced by the weight of everyone she had saved. 3 soldiers at Fort McCoy, a researcher in Milwaukee, a teenage girl in Chicago, 6 Marines in Kandahar. The ones she lost mattered, but so did the ones she saved. Morrison touched her shoulder. You okay? Yeah, Rachel said. I think I am. They walked out of the Pentagon into afternoon sunlight. Rachel's phone buzzed one more time. Text from Corporal Martinez, the soldier from Kandahar, the one who'd offered to testify. Lieutenant, saw the news about your promotion, about the new position. Proud of you, but wanted you to know something. Last week I spoke at a veterans event, told them about Kandahar, about the compound, about you saving my life. 3 other vets came up to me after, said they'd served under medical officers who were incompetent or negligent or just didn't care. Said hearing about you gave them hope that good officers exist, that the system can work. You're changing things, ma'am, not just for the people you save directly, for everyone who hears about it and realizes they don't have to accept broken systems. Keep fighting. We're with you. Rachel showed Morrison. He read it and smiled. See? Not alone. Never was. Just took me 18 months to remember. They caught a cab to the airfield. Rachel had a flight to Chicago in 3 hours. Depositions for the Brennan case, testimony for the federal investigation. The work was just beginning. But this time she wasn't doing it alone. Kelly was testifying. The Fort McCoy survivors were supporting her. Martinez and the Kandahar veterans were ready to defend her record. Even the families of the soldiers she'd lost had reached out to offer forgiveness. The system wasn't fixed. Institutions would still protect predators. Politics would still interfere with medicine. People like Brennan would still exist. But people like Rachel existed too, and Kelly, and Emma, and every person who decided that silence was more dangerous than speaking up. The cab dropped them at the airfield. Morrison walked Rachel to the gate. What happens now? He asked. I testify against Brennan. I start my new position. I figure out how to change systems from the inside instead of just fighting them from the outside. And if the systems fight back, Rachel thought about the past week, about everything she'd survived, about the 18 months she'd spent running from Rachel Kincaid because being her meant accepting responsibility and failure and the weight of impossible decisions. "Then I fight harder," she said. Morrison saluted. "Major Kincaid?" Rachel returned the salute. "Colonel Morrison." She boarded the plane, found her seat, closed her eyes. When she opened them again, Chicago was spread out below. Familiar skyline, familiar streets. But she was looking at it differently now. Not as a place to hide, as a place to finish what she'd started. The trial would take months, the hospital investigation would take longer. But Rachel had time, had authority, had people willing to stand with her. And she had the one thing she'd lost in Kandahar and spent 18 months trying to find again: purpose. 3 weeks later, Rachel stood in a federal courtroom and watched Marcus Brennan's preliminary hearing. He looked smaller somehow, diminished, the arrogance gone, replaced by the desperate energy of a man watching his life disintegrate. His lawyers argued for dismissal, argued the evidence was tainted, argued Rachel had orchestrated a vendetta. The judge listened to 15 minutes of arguments, then cut them off. "Counselors, I've reviewed the evidence, the security footage, the testimony, the medical records, Dr. Brennan's own communications. This case is proceeding to trial. Bail remains denied, and I'm issuing a protective order for all witnesses. Dr. Brennan, if you or your representatives contact any witness or victim in this case, you'll be held in contempt. Do you understand?" Brennan's face went white. "Your Honor, I have rights. You have the right to a fair trial, which you'll receive. Court adjourned." The gavel fell. Rachel walked out of the courtroom to find Kelly waiting in the hallway. They'd become something like friends over the past 3 weeks. Trauma bonding, probably, but real nonetheless. "How do you feel?" Kelly asked. "Like justice might actually happen." "Might?" "The trial's still months away. A lot can go wrong between now and then." Kelly's expression was fierce. "Then we make sure it doesn't. We testify. We tell the truth. We make sure everyone knows what he is." Rachel nodded. "Yeah, we do." They walked out of the courthouse together. Reporters were waiting, cameras, questions. Rachel had learned to handle media attention over the past 3 weeks. Had learned that controlling the narrative meant not letting other people define her story. A reporter called out, "Major Kincaid, what message do you have for other healthcare workers facing similar situations?" Rachel stopped, looked directly at the camera. "Document everything. Find allies. Don't stay silent just because the system tells you to. And understand that speaking up is dangerous. You'll be threatened, attacked, called unstable or vindictive or worse. But staying silent is more dangerous, because silence protects predators and kills patients. So speak. Fight. And trust that you're not alone even when it feels like you are." Another reporter. "What about your military career? What's next?" "I start my new position next week. Medical policy and oversight. I'll be working to make sure experimental programs don't endanger soldiers. That safety comes before innovation. That the people making decisions about medical protocols actually understand medicine." "Do you think you can change the system?" Rachel smiled. "I think systems change when enough people decide they're worth changing. I'm just one person, but I'm not the only one fighting. And that's how institutions fall. One person speaks up, then another, until silence isn't sustainable anymore." The press conference ended. Rachel and Kelly walked to a coffee shop 3 blocks away. Sat in a back booth. Ordered drinks they didn't really want, just to have something to do with their hands. "I got a job offer," Kelly said. "Patient advocacy position, federal oversight program for hospital safety. They want people with insider knowledge of how institutions fail patients." "You gonna take it?" "Already did. Figure if I spent 6 months watching Brennan hurt people and couldn't stop him, I should spend the next 6 years making sure it doesn't happen to anyone else." Rachel raised her coffee cup. To not staying silent. Kelly clinked her cup against Rachel's. To fighting back. They drank. Rachel's phone buzzed. Email notification. She checked it reflexively. The sender was Emma Walsh. The subject line read, "Medical School Acceptance." Rachel opened it. Inside was a screenshot of an acceptance letter. Johns Hopkins, full scholarship, early admission. Below the screenshot, Emma had written, "Following your example. Someone has to be the next generation of doctors who give a damn. Might as well be me." Rachel showed Kelly. Kelly grinned.
See? You're inspiring baby doctors now. That's your legacy. My legacy is 3 soldiers alive at Fort McCoy and a teenage girl who didn't die from medical negligence. Your legacy is showing people that fighting corrupt systems is possible, that speaking truth to power doesn't automatically destroy you, that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, good people win. Rachel thought about that, about the past month, about the 18 months before it, about Kandahar and Chicago and every moment between. I don't know if I won, she said quietly. Brennan's still fighting. The trial could go either way, and there are 100 more Brennans in 100 more hospitals doing the same things. But there's also you, and me, and Emma, and everyone else who saw what happened and decided to stop accepting it. That's how change works. Not one big victory. Lots of small ones. Until the culture shifts and the Brennans of the world realize they can't get away with it anymore. Rachel's phone rang. Morrison. Turn on the news, he said without preamble. Channel 7. Rachel found a TV in the coffee shop. The owner changed the channel. The screen showed a press conference. St. Augustine Memorial Hospital, or what was left of it. A federal prosecutor stood at a podium. Today, we're announcing the indictment of 17 individuals connected to systematic fraud and patient endangerment at St. Augustine Memorial Hospital. These indictments include hospital administrators, board members, and medical staff who participated in or enabled Dr. Marcus Brennan's criminal conduct. Additionally, the hospital will be permanently closed. Assets will be liquidated to provide compensation for victims. This represents one of the largest medical fraud cases in Illinois history. The hospital was closing, the entire institution dismantled. Kelly's eyes were wide. They actually did it. Justice, Rachel said. Real justice. The prosecutor continued. We want to acknowledge the courage of the whistleblowers who came forward, particularly Kelly Andrews and Major Rachel Kincaid, whose testimony and evidence made this prosecution possible. Their actions saved lives and held powerful people accountable. That's what integrity looks like. Rachel's throat felt tight. Kelly grabbed her hand, squeezed. They watched the press conference end, watched the reporters scatter, watched the news cycle move on to the next story. But this story wasn't over. Not yet. The trial still loomed, the depositions, the testimony, the months of legal warfare ahead. Rachel was ready. 6 months later, Rachel stood in a different courtroom and watched the jury foreman read the verdict. In the matter of the United States versus Marcus Brennan, we, the jury, find the defendant guilty on all counts. Brennan's face collapsed. His lawyers immediately started arguing for appeal. The judge denied it. Sentencing was set for 3 weeks later. Brennan got 18 years in federal prison, no parole. His medical license was permanently revoked. His assets were seized to pay restitution to victims. Rachel was there when the sentence was read. Sat in the gallery with Kelly and Emma and Morrison and Agent Torres, watched Brennan led away in handcuffs, watched the man who'd tried to destroy her lose everything. She didn't feel triumphant, just tired and relieved and ready for it to be over. Emma leaned close. How do you feel? Like I can finally stop fighting. You know you won't, though. Rachel smiled. Probably not. They walked out of the courthouse into spring sunshine. Chicago looked different than it had 6 months ago. Cleaner somehow, lighter. Or maybe Rachel just saw it differently now. Her phone buzzed. Text from the Surgeon General. Major Kincaid, your first policy review is Monday. Experimental exoskeleton program. Initial medical assessments show potential skeletal stress issues. They want to proceed anyway. Your call whether to shut it down. Welcome to Command Authority. Rachel showed Morrison. He laughed. They're testing you already. Good. I've been practicing saying no to people who don't want to hear it. Morrison's expression grew serious. Rachel, you know this job is going to be constant battles, constant resistance. You'll make enemies. You'll be called obstructionist. You'll fight with generals and weapons contractors and people who think innovation matters more than safety. I know. And you're okay with that? Rachel thought about the 3 soldiers at Fort McCoy, about the researcher in Milwaukee, about Emma Walsh and every patient Brennan had harmed, about the 11 soldiers in Kandahar who died because systems failed them.
I'm more than okay with it, she said. I'm designed for it. Turns out being the person nobody listens to gave me 18 months of practice fighting systems that don't want to change. Now I get to do it with actual authority. Morrison saluted. Then go change the world, Major. Rachel returned the salute. Working on it, Colonel? She walked away from the courthouse, away from Brennan, away from St. Augustine, and everything that had happened there. Walked toward her new office, her new position, her new purpose. The woman who'd entered that Chicago ER 6 months ago as Sarah Mitchell, quiet, invisible, easy to dismiss, was gone. Rachel Kincaid had taken her place. Loud, visible, impossible to ignore. And she wasn't hiding anymore. 3 years later, Rachel stood in front of a room full of young medical officers and told them a story. About a nurse who tried to disappear. About a doctor who thought power meant immunity. About a system that protected predators until people decided silence was more dangerous than speaking. About how institutions only change when individuals refuse to accept them. You'll face moments, she told the young officers, where doing the right thing costs you, where speaking up means risking your career, where saving a patient means breaking rules, and you'll have to choose. She paused. Let them sit with that. Choose courage, choose patience, choose truth, and understand that you might lose, that the system might crush you, that powerful people will fight to protect their power, but also understand that staying silent guarantees failure, guarantees that nothing changes, guarantees that the next patient, the next soldier, the next person who needs someone to fight for them won't have that person. The room was absolutely silent. So fight, document, find allies, speak up, and trust that you're part of something bigger than yourself, because change doesn't happen all at once. It happens in small moments. One person, one decision, one patient saved, until eventually the culture shifts and the powerful people realize they can't get away with it anymore. She looked at the young faces staring back at her, saw herself at their age, saw the fear and hope and determination that came with wanting to heal people in systems designed to break healers. You're not alone, she said. None of us are. And that's the most important thing I can teach you. Find your people, protect each other, and never stop fighting for what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The lecture ended. The officers filed out. Rachel packed up her materials. Her phone buzzed. Message from Emma Walsh. First day of residency. Already saw an attending make a mistake. Spoke up. Got yelled at. Stood my ground. Patient's fine. Attending's mad. Worth it. Thanks for showing me it was possible. Rachel smiled and typed back. Welcome to medicine. It doesn't get easier. But it gets more important. Keep fighting. She walked out of the lecture hall to find Morrison waiting. Still inspiring the youth? He asked, trying to keep them from making my mistakes. Your mistakes led to institutional reform, 17 federal indictments, and a complete overhaul of experimental weapons oversight. Not exactly cautionary tales. My mistakes also involved 18 months of hiding and almost letting Brennan kill a patient. I'd prefer they skip those parts. They walked across the base together. 3 years had changed things. Rachel was a lieutenant colonel now. Morrison had made full colonel. The medical policy and oversight division had expanded. They'd shut down 6 unsafe programs, reformed protocols across the entire military medical system, saved lives by preventing crises before they happened. The work continued. Rachel's phone rang. Kelly Andrews. Major, sorry, Lieutenant Colonel, I keep forgetting the promotion. What's up, Kelly? Got a situation. Hospital in Detroit. Nurse contacted me through the advocacy program. Says her attending is falsifying patient records. Says administration is covering it up. Says she's scared to come forward. Rachel's jaw tightened. Tell her she's not alone. Tell her we'll protect her. And tell her that people like her attending only win when good people stay quiet. Already did. She wants to meet with you. Says she needs to hear from someone who's been through it. Set it up. I'll be there. Rachel ended the call and looked at Morrison. Sounds familiar? History repeating? Or people finally learning they can fight back? Rachel drove to Detroit the next day, met the nurse, young, terrified, carrying documentation of systematic fraud, listened to her story, told her own. You're going to be scared, Rachel said. You're going to question yourself. You're going to wonder if it's worth it. And I can't promise everything will work out. Can't promise the system will protect you. Can't promise you won't lose things that matter.
The nurse's hands were shaking. Then why do it? Because patients deserve advocates. Because silence enables predators. Because someone has to be the person who says no when everyone else is saying yes. And because you'll carry it forever if you don't. The weight of what you could have prevented, what you could have stopped, that's heavier than any career consequence. The nurse pulled out her phone. I recorded him, altering records, telling staff to lie to families. I have 3 months of recordings. Rachel took the phone, listened to enough to know this was real. This was prosecutable. Call Agent Torres at the FBI, she said. Tell her Lieutenant Colonel Kincaid sent you. Tell her you have evidence. And then let the system do what it's supposed to do. What if the system fails? Then we go around it. We go to media. We go to state regulators. We go to every authority until someone listens. But we don't stop. We don't back down. We don't let them win. The nurse nodded, still scared, but determined. Rachel recognized that look, had seen it in her own mirror 3 years ago. 6 months later, the Detroit hospital attending was indicted. 2 administrators were fired. The nurse was granted federal whistleblower protection. One more victory, one more institution forced to change. The work continued. Rachel stood in front of her office window at Walter Reed and watched the sun set over D.C. 3 years since Chicago. 3 years since Brennan. 3 years since she'd stopped running from Rachel Kincaid and started being her. The journey hadn't been smooth. She'd made enemies, fought with generals, shut down programs that people spent years developing, made decisions that cost careers and budgets and political capital. But she'd also saved lives, reformed systems, inspired people like Emma and the Detroit nurse to speak up instead of stay silent. Changed the culture one fight at a time. Her phone buzzed. Email from the Surgeon General. Lieutenant Colonel Kincaid, we have a situation. Experimental neural implant program. Early testing showing potential complications. Program director says the risks are acceptable. Medical review board is split. Need your assessment and recommendation by Friday. This is a high-profile program with congressional backing. Expect resistance if you shut it down. Rachel smiled. Some things never changed. She opened a new document and started typing her assessment. Clinical analysis. Risk evaluation. Comparison to similar programs. Recommendation. The recommendation was simple. Shut it down until the complications were resolved. No amount of congressional backing justified risking soldiers' lives. She hit send. Her phone rang 30 seconds later. A general she'd argued with before, angry about her recommendation, threatening to go over her head. Rachel listened to the rant, let him finish, then spoke calmly. General, with respect, my job is protecting soldiers, not protecting programs. If you want to proceed with unsafe testing, you'll need to find someone else to sign off on it, because I won't. And when something goes wrong, when soldiers get hurt because you prioritized innovation over safety, that's on you, not me. She ended the call. Morrison appeared in her doorway. Making friends again? Someone has to be the one people hate. Might as well be me. You know they're going to try to go around you. Let them try. I've got documentation, medical evidence, authority, and I'm willing to testify before Congress if they push it. Morrison grinned. 3 years ago you were trying to disappear. Now you're threatening congressional testimony. 3 years ago I thought being invisible was safer. Turns out being loud is more effective. Rachel's phone buzzed. Text from Emma. Finished my first year of residency. Spoke up 14 times when attendings made questionable calls. Got yelled at 12 times. Patients are all fine. Worth it. You were right. This job is brutal. But it matters. Thanks for showing me that mattering is more important than being comfortable. Rachel showed Morrison. He read it and nodded. That's your real legacy. Not the programs you shut down, not the policies you changed, the people you inspired to fight. Legacy feels too grand. I'm just doing my job. Rachel, you're teaching an entire generation of medical officers that speaking up is possible, that challenging authority isn't career suicide, that sometimes the system actually works when good people push it. That's not just doing your job. That's changing medicine. Rachel looked out the window again, watched the lights come on across the city. Somewhere out there, nurses were questioning doctors. Whistleblowers were gathering evidence. People were deciding that silence cost too much, because someone had shown them it was possible to fight. That thought, that she'd changed the equation for people she'd never meet,
that mattered more than medals or promotions or recognition. That was the legacy worth building. Rachel turned back to her computer, pulled up the next case file. Another experimental program, another risk assessment, another decision that would make someone angry. She started reading, because the work continued, the fights continued, the resistance continued, but so did the victories. One patient saved, one whistleblower protected, one unsafe program shut down, again and again and again, until the culture shifted, until silence became unacceptable, until the Brennans of the world realized their power had limits. That was the fight. And Rachel Kincaid, the woman who'd entered that Chicago ER as nobody and left as someone impossible to ignore, wasn't finished fighting yet, not even close.